just for everyone's information, I am now recording on OBS, so that if anyone wants to watch this later or missed the presentation, they will be available to them. So, for a moment, I'm actually going to briefly pause the music.
Yes.
So that we can at least watch the first thing that I have queued up on this presentation. Let me know if you can hear it in a moment. Sharing my screen. Making sure that it's an application and not the screen itself. Let me know if you guys are all in.
Looks good.
Cool. Bless you.
Thank you.
Alrighty then. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
Woo!
Dear Tim and Moby, why must we continue this never-ending cycle of violence? Are the flame clocks just some cruel joke? From Noah. Hey Noah, I can understand if killing brings you some discomfort, but you owe it to your friends and to your queen to make it to homecoming. By killing Agnians and filling your colony's flame clock, you can keep those important to you alive. In that sense, it's all worth it. Isn't that right, Moby? Moby?
What?
So,
Fucking crazy.
putting the music back on.
I believe it's coming through your mic as well.
Yeah,
stream?
I paused. Oh, is it now? Can you guys hear the music in the background here?
Yeah.
Alright, then I'm gonna fix that real quick. I have an idea of how to do so.
Is there any more audio in your presentation? Because we can just mute the stream.
No.
Just do that then.
Alright
There you
then.
There you go.
So just mute my stream. And I'll leave the music on for myself so that I can kind of hear it in the background.
Yeah.
Alright. So, the year is 2022. It's deep into quarantine, and I was in the middle of my first week as a full-time employee at ZeniMax Online Studios. It had been about 2 years since Xenoblade Chronicles 1 got its amazing remaster, and about 5 years since the release of Xenoblade 2, a game that had somehow become my favorite game of all time. I was between games at the time myself. Back 4 Blood had disappointed me back in October, and I was still waiting for the release of Psychonauts 2 later that year. I'd even tried my hand at the SMT games and fell off due to the game's lack of player direction. I missed the Xenoblade games. The deep and flashy combat, memorable characters, and the amazing stories. Not that one. And most of all, I missed the worlds. Rich, vast, visually stunning for the hardware they were on. Fantastical in a way that unlike anything I was seeing in the RPG space elsewhere. I remember the exact words that came into my head. I'm ready to fall in love again. Lo and behold, halfway through that very week, a Nintendo Direct aired. And capping it off, as the final announcement, was the reveal of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Which I thought at first looked like any other anime game, to be honest, but that's kind of beside the point. There were a lot of them in that presentation, but whatever. My mind was racing at what I'd seen. It looked like the universes of the past 2 games had been smashed together. There was a lot of thoughts that I had. I mean, who was the Gormati girl that looked like Nia, and the guy that looked like Vandam? And why was he white now? What's with the giant-faced Mechon that we saw? Why were there blades that seemed to be running around without drivers? What happened to all the characters in the previous games? Why were the worlds of 1 and 2 at war? It was time to get some answers. It was time to see what was next for the series. it was time to fall in love again. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. A game I don't love. And my thoughts on it. So, from here on, I don't have a specific script. I'm just going to kind of be spitballing it here, but let's get started. Some development stuff first and foremost. After making Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Monolith Soft wanted to make Xenoblade 3, but they had a couple of other potential options before them. Specifically, Xenoblade 3 was on the table. Plans of it actually began during the development of Xenoblade 2. I was hoping that this would be a playlist playing.
We can always do the reverse of like you play it in the background on the stream and we unmute the stream.
You guys cool with that?
Yeah, do it.
All right. Out of the watch together and into the unmuted stream.
Yeah.
All right.
It's loud.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
Fixing that for you. Cool.
Also, we can adjust it. Put it at whatever volume you need it to be.
Yeah, I'll leave it here for now, for my sake, but
Yeah.
you guys can do whatever you want.
Perfect.
So anyway,
Yeah.
plans for Xenoblade 2 Xenoblade 3 began during Xenoblade 2's development, and as a matter of fact, it's pretty easily provable that doing so influenced the development of 2 to make sure that 3 was waiting in the wings, which I find kind of neat, and I'll explain why later. But also planned was the potential for Xenoblade Chronicles X 2, the sequel to the Wii U game that was kind of more of an MMO, but single player. It was a little weird. And particularly interesting, according to interviews, a, quote, violent, erotic, and heavy M-rated game that would push the limit of what Nintendo would allow them to make. Now, unfortunately at the time, only Xenoblade pitches were being accepted. So, Xenoblade 3 went into development after its pitch was greenlit. The game was announced in February of 2022, with the initial release window of sometime in the fall. I want you guys to guess for me when the game came out.
Like,
Was it delayed a year?
yeah, like summer 2023.
If you said summer 2022, you would be right. The game was pushed forwards a couple of months for release. I think this is because they didn't want it to conflict with releases that were also happening at the time, but the game was actually not delayed, but, like, released early. It was not released in an uncomfortable state or anything, but there was definitely a delay in people getting their copies of the, like, the special edition, which I actually have. The game was made by mostly the same crew as Xenoblade 2. Directors, localizers, etc. Particularly was Masatsugu Saito, returning officially this time as the game's main character designer. He was originally technically a, what's the word? A freelancer working on Xenoblade 2, despite the fact that he designed the whole main cast. This time around, he'd been hired on fully to do the designs for the main cast. And I remember people online saying that, like, oh, thank God they fired the guy from the last game. These designs look so much better. They're, like, less sexualized and shit. And, like, guess what, motherfuckers? It's the same dude. Specifically, he was given direction to make less flashy designs due to the game's darker tone. On top of this, localization was now under Monolith Soft's belt with some experience, which is going to come up much later. But I just want you to remember that Monolith Soft has direct experience with localization now. And lastly, some neat little tidbits. The game was decided to have flutes as their main kind of like motif for the music, because the two main characters are both flutists. They have flutes that they play. And in order to get the sounds as right as possible, real flutes were made based on the designs from the game, as you can see in the picture in the bottom right. These flutes were played while producing the game's soundtrack to get the exact sound correct in all the game's songs. Like I said, The flutes are the main motif of the game, and hopefully you'll hear a lot of it in the soundtrack that I'm playing right now. And by the way, this game lost Best Soundtrack to God of War that year, so what the fuck, come on.
Yeah.
And as I was saying before in the lobby, this game's soundtrack is genuinely incredible, but that's really all I have room to say about it in this presentation. So, I know I've kind of stopped and started this like 3 times, but here begins my actual critique. Let's take a moment to enjoy the obligatory meme slide for just a second. We good? Cool. Moving on. I'll post this later. So, let's talk a bit about what the hell this game really is about. Because I spent a lot of the last presentation giving a kind of plot recap. I'm not going to be doing that this time. This is a critique, this is not a recap. But I still need you guys to know some things about the setting in order to actually understand what's going on. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 takes place in a world called Ionios. It is built on the backs of all the landscapes from the previous 2 games. Like I said, it is the 2 worlds of 1 and 2 smashed violently together. Now, that does not mean that the people that inhabit this world are exactly, descendant from these 2 people. Ionios is specifically a world that has no history. It has no past and no future that is known to the people of Ionios. Ionios is inhabited by 2 quote-unquote countries, called Keves and Agnes. Keves are more or less the people of Xenoblade 1's world, and Agnes are the people of Xenoblade 2. These 2 countries, which are really more just peoples, are at war for unclear reasons, and the 2 sides despise each other, absolutely. If an Agnian soldier and a Kevesi soldier meet on the battleground, they're going to kill each other, no questions asked. The kind of aesthetics of these 2 worlds are very specific. Keves on the left is very kind of advanced high-tech sci-fi, maybe a little evil if you want to say. And Agnes on the right is very high-tech advanced sci-fi, but also Japanese. And this innovative and never-before-seen dichotomy has never been used for 2 warring nations in a Nintendo game ever. So, very original, and I'm a big fan. Now, of actual note about the people in these 2 nations, it's hard to describe them as people that live actual lives. The soldiers of Keves and Agnes are all children. They are born from pods at age 10, and they die automatically at age 20. They have an expiration date and no lifespan beyond those 2 numbers. They are born at the age of 10 and basically brainwashed into being soldiers from the moment that they are dropped from their pods. You have a kid that is sent out to a colony, made to train in whatever division or whatnot that is available to him, and then either he fights to the death in some battle, or makes it to 10 years, or terms as they call them, and dies automatically anyway.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
By all means.
Who trains the kids?
Other soldiers.
Okay.
Now you'd think that this would mean that there's a very limited supply of soldiers in this war. Not quite. The soldiers are not really aware of this, but when you die in this war, you essentially are going to be reborn shortly afterwards in another one of those pods. So the soldiers in this war are all the same people being born over and over again with no memories of who they were in the past lives, kind of like Blades in 2, and made to fight this pointless war for eternity. Beyond the ordinary kind of like grunt soldiers and infantry, though, there are a couple of special types of members of this war, such as Offseers, which our 2 protagonists, Noah and Mio, in that second picture are. Offseers are, it's difficult to describe because the responsibility isn't direct warfare, but rather whenever soldiers die in the war, an Offseer is supposed to essentially see off their soul. They take out their flute, they play a little song, and you see little motes of light leaving their body and floating off into the abyss. This is kind of a very somber thing, and it fits very closely to the themes of the game, I'll say in a second. But it kind of provides these soldiers a very morbid perspective on the lives of the people around them, because all they ever see is death. On top of all of this, if a soldier makes it to their 10th term, I mentioned that they automatically die. It's a little more complicated than that. Essentially, soldiers are promised this thing called a homecoming at their 10th year. It's this huge deal that everyone's trying to like survive and get to, and very, very few soldiers actually make it to their homecoming. And what a homecoming is, essentially, the soldier of age is brought to some base that the side of the war has, where the queen of either nation is there to kind of like honor them, and a bunch of Offseers do the same thing for them that they do for for their fallen. However, the person is still alive. That said, as the Offseers play their song, their body will dissolve away and they will disappear anyway. This is considered the highest honor for either side of the war. Now, on top of this, I have not discussed at all about what this war is being fought over. That's because this war is not being fought over anything. The truth of this world is that Ionios is controlled by a group called Mobius, the people you see in the bottom picture. There's a lot more of them than just those two, but they're just the best example I could find. Mobius are immortal beings who essentially subsist off of the deaths and souls of the soldiers in the war. They play both sides, acting as higher-ups for both sides of the war, and giving both sides kind of strategic input and things like that that would then cause more and more extravagant deaths to then further allow Mobius to survive. By the soldiers, they are referred to as consuls, but their proper term is Mobius. I'll talk about them later, but it's just kind of you need to know that they are the ones pulling the strings. Overall, this game's themes are that of letting go of the past and moving forward, the uncertainty of the future, love in all forms, death and loss, and uniting people from different places. So now that that's out of the way, may I present to you the entire plot of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in one slide.
Well,
Let's go.
Here's the entire story. Our main cast on the top there, from left to right, Uni, Taion, Noah, Mio, Lanz, and Senna. Noah and Mio are kind of the main protagonists of this game. Noah a little bit more than Mio, but whatever. So, the game starts with a flashback scene. We see Noah as a kid with his friends Uni and Lanz, and also a fourth kid that I'm not going to care to describe, running through the streets of some city in the world of Xenoblade 1. They talk about how there's going to be a firework festival and the queen's going to be there and shit. And as they're running along, time stops around Noah as he looks up past the clock tower in the middle of the square to see another planet hurtling towards his before basically light flashes and we never see what happens. When I say hurtling, I mean he basically only sees the horizon by this point. It's so close. This scene is never brought up in the game again. Cut to the middle of the war. Team Keves, which is what I will use to describe Noah, Lanz, and Uni now aged up to probably around 18 or 19, are fighting in like a big sortie. They win, and eventually are sent off to gather some resources and do some scouting for another mission, when they run into Team Agnes, which is Taion, Mio, and Senna. These two groups of three duke it out for a little bit, because, like I said, they're trained to kill each other, until a mysterious third party, this, like, huge ripped dude named Vandam, shows up and tries to get them to stop by basically knocking everyone out on their asses in this fight. He's doing this because there's some other creepy, weird monster on the way, and he's trying to get their help in killing it. And he basically slams them with some weird energy wave thing that gives them powers. The kids fight this monster, which I'm just going to call DJ. It is a Mobius, they don't know this at the time. And in doing so, Noah and Mio suddenly fuse into this one bigger creature, which overpowers DJ and he runs off. The two teams decide to part ways, but they only do that because they helped each other survive this fight, and knowing that, like, if they ever met again, they'd kill each other. Which happens about, 6 hours later, when they head home and find out that these powers that were granted to them by Vandom now make them enemies of their respective sides, and the only way that they can survive is with each other. The only thing that they remember from Vandom after that is that he said that they must go find something called the City, which is a word that they don't understand. It's somewhere on the other side of the continent, so thus begins their road trip. They spend a lot of time crossing Ionios, liberating colonies of other soldiers, including a group called Colony 4, which are friends of Noah's. And along the way, Noah and Mio begin to fall in love. A little bit later, and I'm skipping a lot here, Keves Castle, the main HQ of the Kevesi side of the war, hears that Colony 4 kind of allied with Noah and his group, and they threaten them with obliteration unless their general and another guy that from the Agnian side go and try to kill Noah and the rest of their team. I'm going to refer to them as Ouroboros, because that's kind of the name of their power. Noah and the gang fight those two generals. They end up fighting their way into Keves Castle to destroy the weapon that they're threatening Colony 4 with, and they meet this guy there, a Mobius in golden armor named N. He's wearing a mask, but after the gang leaves, it's revealed that N is another version of Noah, probably another soldier, another reincarnation of his from the past. So there's two Noahs, and as we shortly learn after, a Mobius named M, who is another Mio, running around at the same time. Ouroboros finally reaches the city. They discover that it's populated by a bunch of people that are descendants of soldiers in the war that had met up, had children, and basically founded an entire third group in this world, and they want nothing more than to get rid of Mobius and set things back to the way they're supposed to be. In order to do this, they tell Ouroboros that they've got to go and rescue a couple of people, namely the queens of either nation, and in order to do this, they got to break into a prison camp so that they can find someone who knows where one of the queens is. So the gang breaks into prison, and when they try to break back out with the person, they end up getting captured because N and M show up to stop them. Which is where it's revealed to the group that they are essentially evil clones of Noah and Mio. After that is the cuckening. And after that, Ouroboros, the group manages to rescue Queen Nia of Agnes' side of the war. She reveals to them that the leader of Mobius, a guy named Z, is inside of a big Death Star called Origin at the center of the world. So they go to Origin, they fight N, and then they fight Z, and the game ends. And also, we see a very, very horribly traumatizing cutscene where after they've finally destroyed all of Mobius, and the worlds are beginning to split back apart after these groups have spent so much time together, and the party really gets along now. Noah and Mio are definitely madly in love. We see the two worlds start to slowly drift away from each other like two Z-fighting planes. And they try to run towards each other to see, to just, spend the last couple seconds they possibly can together before Mio and her team disappear over the horizon and we're just left with Noah and his Kevesi team. Also, I forgot to mention they fight Z as a giant head.
Fun.
And after that happens, where the world split apart, the game retcons itself, and it never happened.
Oh.
I'm
Okay.
skipping a lot to summarize it this much, but this is truly all you need to know to understand the, like, solely the main plot of this game. And I know that I kind of, like, spoke for a while, but think about how long my Xenoblade 2 presentation was when it was mostly just, like, plot summary. This really doesn't feel like a lot when it comes to an RPG. And let's compare that, for example, to Xenoblade 1 and 2. This is as little detail as I could get those two plot lines down to. And if you just look at these side by side with the plot of Xenoblade 3, it really feels like Xenoblade 3 is less meaty of a plot. I know that I gave a bunch of, like, kind of moments and stuff like that in the game, but, like, it really felt like as I was playing it, that by the time I reached the game's climax, about, like, 2/3 to, like, 70% of the way through the game, I thought I was only halfway through, because just not a whole lot had really happened of import. And I think that is influenced a bit by the way the game is structured. I kind of lampshaded this in my previous talk, but Xenoblade games like to talk about themselves or hold themselves as if they're stories with chapters. And let's just count the number of chapters that are in these games. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is a game with 17 chapters, some of which are very quick, let's be honest. But every one of those chapters feels like it has something that goes on that defines that one part of the game. Be it a dungeon, or a big story event, or something like some twist in the game happening. Every chapter progresses the narrative at least a little bit, right? Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has 10 chapters. Quite a bit less, but every one of them is, like, very tightly wound into itself, has, like, a beginning, middle, and end, big climax, something moves the plot forwards. People like to say that the first half of Xenoblade 2 is kind of, like, slowly paced and everything, and I've talked a bit about that. But, like, even then, Xenoblade 2's plotline happens pretty cleanly across each of these chapters, with something happening and moving something forward each time. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has 7 chapters. A whole 10 chapters less than the first game. And it genuinely feels to me like chapters 2 through, like, 4 could all be one chapter if they were in one of the previous games. Not a whole lot really happens between the team coming together in chapter 1 to the team getting to the city in chapter 5. Like, chapters 2, 3, and 4 are just them coming across other colonies of soldiers, people that they probably know, that are basically being brainwashed into not liking them anymore and wanting them dead, and the gang has to beat them up and knock some sense into them and kill a Mobius along the way. It's very samey, and most of all, my biggest problem with it is that Ouroboros, the party, seems to handle a lot of their problems pretty much the moment they crop up. I can count way more big issues, big enemies, that show up once and get dealt with immediately, before they're even allowed to fester or let the, like, player really sit on them and think about them. There's so many one-off or one-and-done events in the game that, like, Ouroboros hears about or is suddenly met with, and then they just go off and deal with it immediately, and nothing gets to linger. I mentioned before that a couple of colonies you come across in chapters 2 through 4 are being, like, held at gunpoint by a Mobius to kill you. Consul K or Mobius K. Consul and Mobius, they're interchangeable. K taking over Colony 4, you find out about that, you kill him 30 minutes later. Q tries to ransom Valdi, he shows up and does that. Valdi's another guy, by the way. Q shows up, he menaces Valdi, and him and Valdi go back to their colony, and the gang is like, well, we should probably go kill that guy, and they do. Consul J taking over Colony Lambda. J gets to stick around, but, like, the fact that he took over Colony Lambda and tried to kill Ouroboros with them is dealt with literally the moment that you first find that out. Ethel and Kamaravi, Ethel is the general from Colony 4 I mentioned before. You find out that she's trying to, or being made to, kill Ouroboros, and the first time that you encounter her after that, it's just dealt with. Nothing more. I don't need to go over the rest of these, you get the idea. But the ones that kind of linger around are not even all of them that great. DJ the monster that I mentioned that they fought when they first got their powers are really two Mobius fusing together, consoles D and J. And they kind of act as your, like, rival throughout the game that shows up multiple times to fight you. And it's kind of the same each time. The big twist is that one of them is, like, an old friend of Noah, Uni, and Lance that had, like, died when they were kids and become Mobius after that. And, like, the whole point of running into them multiple times is the angst that comes from dealing with a friend who you used to really like, but then trying to kill you. But keep in mind that every time they take over a colony to try to kill you with them, they're your friends being made to kill you. It's kind of the same thing. Consoles N and M are kind of the same. They're the real, like, main antagonists of the game, the ones that oppose the player the most. But, like, they're great, and I'll talk about them later. For the most part, you just have a bunch of villains, Mobius, that you keep coming across over and over again, and you just kill them like that. Now, these are supposed to be like the villains of the world, the biggest deals, the biggest problem. Mobius really is the only problem that Ionios has to deal with. Do you guys want to know how many Mobius there are? There are 25. One for every letter of the alphabet, save for A. And guess what? I don't like Mobius. Every one of them is basically interchangeable with one another, save for N and M, who are just unique characters. If you've seen one Mobius, you've seen them all. They're all that same kind of generic, sadistic anime villain brand. The sort of type that'll, like, kick a guy in the nuts, laugh at them, and then keep doing it again and again because they keep finding it funny. And it's worst of all with D and J, because they're supposed to be like these guys you keep running into, and they're sadists, and they, like, keep menacing you over and over, and you just can't seem to kill them. But, like, Metalface from Xenoblade 1 was the same thing, and he was done way better, because he was part of a group of, like, 5-faced Mechon, and he was the first one that you encountered, and he didn't even speak the first time, and he still bled with, like, this charisma of just a guy you want to hate. And then by the time he shows back up again and starts talking, like, you've already dealt with another faced Mechon that was actually kind of a chill guy. He was a piece of shit, but, like, he wasn't nearly as bad as Metalface was. I just like Metalface a lot. And D&J felt like they're retreading ground. Either way, Mobius as a whole, I say here they have no visual identity whatsoever. If you've seen one Mobius, you've seen them all. They all have the same color palette. As a matter of fact, they're pretty much all identical, save for body size and shape, from their feet to their neck, with the only thing different about them being their helmets. And I could not possibly tell you, if you showed me any Mobius, which one was which, by just showing me their helmet. Because there's so many of them, and they're all the same, and there's nothing differentiating them any further.
Doesn't X have, like, a big X on their face?
No, she's just got a scar. She's got an X, like, hair clip. You can see her, she's the little one in the top picture. I don't have a picture of her in this, but yeah. Her, Z, and X, Z, and Y, and N and M are the only ones that actually stand out visibly. And that's just because X and Y don't wear helmets. And even then, I still don't like them. Anyway, these guys as villains, they're never given any sort of, like, level of compelling character writing that previous villains in the series had. I'll talk about this in quite some time, but we even heard in an interview that Tetsuya Takahashi, the director, wanted Mobius to just be evil and not have any, like, actual explanation or anything, because he wanted it to just feel like they were just real, actual bad people from the real world, who usually don't have any major reason why they're bad besides, fuck it, I wanted money, or something like that. And, I mean, I guess it works, like, because that's what it feels like. but it's still a story, and I want the story to have compelling characters, and these guys just aren't it. Beyond that, the kind of trademark ability that Mobius has as villains is that they can turn into these big monster guys. And most of them do it at some point whenever you fight them. Some of them are kind of the same as each other, but they have like different body shapes and sizes and moves. So like you got like the big guys that like the ones on the bottom, you got like the really monstrous guy in the middle. Their monster forms are the ones that are more unique and memorable, but once you start fighting enough of them, you start to figure out that they're kind of reusing all the same skeletons and rigs. So even then, there's like 5 or so different types of Mobius that you'll actually fight, and their only difference is whatever they do in combat. On top of that, 2 Mobius can link together and form like a fusion or whatever, kind of like your characters can in this game. It's a big gameplay mechanic I haven't really brought up yet. And you'd think that that would be a really cool and interesting thing to keep doing. Like, the villains have the same powers as the protagonists. They should, like, mirror each other by doing it a lot. But only 2 pairs of Mobius ever do it. And they're both, like... It's either D and J merging together as their, like, rival character, and then it's O and P, I remember, who do it once and get instantly flattened by Mio, who punches them into a rock 30 feet away. X and Y are kind of built up to be the, like, seconds in command to the main Mobius Z, and they never do it for some reason, which would be great, because, I mean, then it would actually make them stand out more. And probably worst of all is at the very end of the game, once all Mobius are defeated and the worlds are starting to split apart, all the protagonists start to talk about how they kind of understand where they're coming from. They just wanted to protect the world they knew. Like they're trying to get you to sympathize with them out of nowhere, literally after the final boss is dead. And also, no, they weren't trying to protect the world they knew. They were trying to feast on the souls of 10-year-olds. Like, they're not good guys here. But when it comes to villains I don't like Mobius, and I fucking hate Z.
Zed, Sam, come on.
You're right, sorry, this game is British. I don't like Zed. Thematically, he's alright. I mentioned before that the themes of the game are kind of this, like, stagnation sort of thing. Ionios is a world with no past, no future. The reason for this is that after hearing that their worlds were going to fuse, the denizens of Xenoblade 1 and 2's settings started getting really antsy about the future. They were worried that they were all going to die, and that, like, the future was uncertain to them. So when the worlds merged, it basically manifested as a tulpa, and its name is Zed. And he represents that by locking the world into essentially a stasis, where nothing ever changes, and all the people in it are just never meant to question anything and kill each other for eternity. Because that's what the people in those worlds meant. They wanted to just die over and over. Not like, oh, I don't know if, like, I'm gonna be able to have money for dinner next week. And I kind of don't like that at all. Zed is not a person. He's a manifested concept. This is even stated by the characters in the game. And that fact manifests into a completely one-dimensional villain. He is the same sort of, like, smug, whatever, like, super powerful being that the protagonists can hardly touch character you've probably seen in a million shonen anime. Like, Zed has nothing unique going for him whatsoever when it comes to characterization. He speaks in extremely verbose words, and he makes it sound like he's trying to expel these great platitudes of philosophy and whatever whenever you see him in cutscenes. Because I should mention, the protagonists never meet him until the end of the game. All you ever get of Zed is just like, oh, the protagonists, like, killed another console, cut away to a literal amphitheater that he sits in forever, as he, like, watches their movements on a projector, and says something cryptic about how, like, he cannot allow them to disrupt the flow of the world or something like that. And that's all you get from him until the protagonists meet him. It's ridiculous. Look, Zanza from Xenoblade 1 was a pretty flat character. I'm not gonna lie. But, like, at least he was interesting and fun to watch. This guy, he's basically just the devil. What I mean by that is that the way that he recruits new Mobius is that when someone dies in the war, Zed might, like, pull their soul aside into the amphitheater that he lives in, and just, like, kind of poke and prod at them mentally until they, like, agree to become Mobius, which is basically portrayed as selling their soul. Like, it's basically just watching a guy make a Faustian deal with the devil. And beyond that, the reason that the protagonists never get to meet this guy is because, as a character, he's entirely passive. Zed has technically already won by the time the game starts, because the world is his. So, all he has to do to maintain that rule is just chill out in this amphitheater and never, like, fight the protagonists, because there's no reason for him to. He literally has nothing to do the entire game. So, there's no, like, oh, we gotta stop Zed from, like, doing this one thing before we fight him because our friends are in danger, or, like, because it's how he draws power from the world or something like that. No, it never crosses anyone's mind to do anything like that. The goal is just assassinate Zed. And then on top of that, you know, his final boss fight is 15 phases long, and if you die on any of them, you go back to the start.
Jeez.
It's really more like 5 with a bunch of little sub-phases, but they're all broken up with cutscenes, so, like, you can kind of count it as 15 phases. It's complicated. A bunch of the mechanics kind of change. And I should mention, I said it before, you fight Zed in this form for, like, the first phase or two, and then he turns into a giant head. And he totally ruins the, or he totally, like, bit crushes the feed if you're streaming the game, because it's just so many fucking pixels and effects and stuff going on. And yes, that is an actual quote of his down there. He kind of, like, throws a little childish tantrum before he just disappears into the void, I guess. So, I hate the villains. I really hate the main antagonist. And as for the setting of the game, I just kind of don't like it. Ionios, as a world, as a setting, I mean, it's not really that great. Let's be honest. The world is empty. That is undeniable. Kevis and Agnes, the two sides of the war, are not countries. They are peoples. They don't even have ideologies to fight over because Mobius never gives them one. They're just trained to hate the other side for no reason. What this means is that there are no settlements in the game. No towns or cities besides the one city. So the game is almost entirely wilderness. There are no villages or anything to come across with any sort of story to tell, besides colonies of soldiers that I'll get to later. And what that means is that there's no kind of history for the world. It's never recorded what previous soldiers did or what major battles used to be like, because Mobius doesn't want the soldiers in the war to think about anything else than what's going on right now. And what that essentially means is that the world is empty of any sort of lore to find. The characters are basically conditioned to never question anything they see because it's just natural to them. There's a giant hand sticking out of the ground in the bottom picture down there, and they never think to ask, like, why. Mentioned before that it's almost entirely wilderness, which is neat, but, like, it just means that all the sights that you're seeing are very broad strokes here, the same. You're going to see big cliff sides with great views. You're going to see weird-looking, like, landmarks and stuff made out of the natural environments. Occasionally you'll come across some ruins, which I'll talk about in a second. But because of this, the only real differentiation between environments is the climate. And that feels really weird to explore a world like that, where the more you move, the more things kind of feel the same. And most of all, the world is built on the backs of Bionis and Allrest from 1 and 2. So there's no new landscapes to see. Sure, they've changed a lot since I last visited them. Sure, the smashing of the two of them together has created differently shaped continents with different landmarks in them. But they're built out of the same things from 1 and 2. So it's just kind of a hodgepodge of things we've already seen from the previous games. And the ones that, the ruins and stuff that you find that are like known places from previous games, the characters, Ouroboros, are basically conditioned to never really comment on it. Like, they have nothing to look at the ruins of Fonza Maima from Xenoblade 2 and think like, man, this used to be a place where people lived that was like, that had a reason to be built this way, that had people that like did things here. Instead, they look at the ruins of a building and go like, this would make a good place to camp for the night because it's cover. Now, all that said, for gameplay, I'm actually into Ionios a lot. It's the best world to explore from any mainline game. Mainline as in other than Xenoblade X. There's a lot in Ionios to actually see and do that isn't just environmental stuff. First of all, the way to explore the world feels just better than any previous game. There's a lot of different ways to explore the world besides just running around on your feet. At least stuff that'll come up periodically to kind of diversify your movement throughout the game. The most noteworthy of which is there's a great sea that you can kind of see in that second picture, that in order to explore it, you are actually straight up given a boat that you can pilot around and hit like a turbo on to really move around quicker. It controls different from normal movement, and it's great for ferrying you around. You can't fight in it, you have to get out of the boat to fight. But that's actually pretty like quick to do in the game. And it feels really cool to, like, out of nowhere, have this massive sea to cross, and you're given an entirely different method of traversing it. But for all the actual, like on-foot stuff, there are hazards and things like that to contend with that diversify how you move around the world. And the best thing about that is that unlike Xenoblade 2, in order to deal with them, there are no field skill checks. No more are the days of having to go into the menu and equip a bunch of blades with specific skills so you can melt some ice in your way, interact with the object, and then realize that you don't have enough points and go back into the menu and start the process over so that you can maybe get enough fire guys together to melt the ice. It is so nice to be able to just progress the story, be given new abilities, and capitalize on them in the game in order to explore the world. And by that I mean there are exploratory hazards around the world. Sands and dirt shifting underneath your feet, creating falls down hills that you can't climb until you gain the ability to learn to do so and get a temporary ability for like 10 seconds to be able to run up a falling hill to actually be able to cross it. I'm talking things like vines and shit covering walls that you learn how to climb. These like grappling hook devices left behind by previous soldiers that you can fire off and slide down them like you're Sonic the Hedgehog, grinding on a rail to make from place to place. Like, it's such small stuff, and technically it's not really like a gameplay thing because it's just you're moving in a different way, you're not pressing any new buttons. But like, the fact that it is different like this and that it looks new and unique makes just exploring the world feel cooler. But the stuff that does change gameplay-wise are things like these weird background events and collectibles in the world. The game is full of like life going on. Nothing that's like left behind by the past or implying something that's coming into the future, but Ionios is alive now. There are animals that you can counter that are fighting each other. Some for survival, some for territory, it doesn't matter. And these are often referred to as skirmishes, where if you approach them, instead of prompting a normal battle, it'll actually like put up a thing on your UI that tells you to pick a side in the fight. And depending on the one that you pick, you get different rewards. So like, oh, there's like a wolf fighting some armored cows. Like, you can side with the wolf and help him kill the cows, and you get like more experience. Or you save the cows and fight the wolf, and you get more gold. That's really cool to me. Other stuff is like supply drops you'll see in the distance, where like a drone flies out and drops a crate of supplies and leaves a flare. And you can go after that crate and take the supplies for yourself, but other soldiers running around in the area might have gotten there first, and you have to fight them for it. And this is like random stuff that just happens in the background that you need to know about and find. And as for collectibles, there's stuff like ether fonts that you can find and capture to let yourself upgrade yourself more. Or, probably the most morbid, Mio and Noah are Offseers. So whenever you find corpses of previous soldiers, you can play them off and watch the motes fly away as they're basically like petrified corpses wither away into dust. And for doing so, you actually gain affinity with the NPCs that you've already allied by that point, because you're seeing off their dead. On top of this, there's some other cool world building stuff going on. Black Fog is this black fog that just kind of rolls into various places in the world every once in a while. And it's said to you that black fog is supposed to kind of imply at some point in the future an annihilation event will happen in the vicinity. And what that means is that anywhere within the black fog is suddenly blipped out of existence by a massive explosion. And everything that it leaves behind in the surrounding area is still left as if nothing even happened. That picture on the top there with the floating landmass, that's actually what the world looks like. An annihilation event happened there and left the top of the mountain in place as if the mountain was still there, but the rest of it was annihilated. And the implication is that this is happening with more and more frequency around the world, and slowly but surely Ionios is going to just wither away into nothing as the world is annihilated more and more by these events, and less land is available. This is never relevant to the plot. I assume it's because Mobius doesn't want the soldiers to worry about that sort of thing, because there's no point in it. But it matters to Mobius, because this world is their only lifeblood and sustenance. So they should have soldiers concerning themselves about these annihilation events, because it spells problems for Mobius, and all they care about is themselves. But it's just not a thing in the main story. Occasionally, the characters in the game use black fog to hide from like surveillance and stuff, where they just kind of like duck into a cloud and just run through it because devices have trouble seeing through it. And there is a lot more on black fog in the DLC, but that's a whole different thing that I'm not going to talk about here. But overall, my last closing thoughts on Ionios as a place. Mobius describes their position of power as the endless now. A world with no past, no future, nothing but the present, where they can just live in sadism and fuck with these children because they have nothing better to do and it's how they live. And what it leaves us with is a world that is just empty. There's nothing in it. No past, no future, nothing to enjoy. And while that's thematically and like writing-wise interesting, an empty world is an empty world. And yet, the world still leans heavily on the past, just not for the characters or the story. Here are some shots of Ionios. There are different regions of the world, all wilderness shots, even the one in the top right with the city in the background. That's just called Mac the Wildwoods, and that's just what they think the place is supposed to look like. It's just an overgrown city, and they don't realize what it's supposed to be. This place is these places are all cool in and of themselves, but like overall they just make up more pieces of this puzzle of like a world with not a whole lot going on in them. And I mentioned that there's 0 towns or anything to find in the game. I am a little bit wrong on that. technically there are two settlements, two things I would refer to as settlements that are built by either side of the war that you can come across. And they are Fort Overbus on the left and Relay Base Bridge on the right. Fort Overbus is kind of a base built underneath the bottom of Kevis Castle, kind of like the last line of defense before enemies would breach the gates. When you arrive, it is uninhabited. No one is there. Relay Base, meanwhile, on Erythea Sea, is more of just a giant dungeon full of Agnian soldiers that you're just supposed to cleave your way through, because they're your enemies in this case. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, well, wait, Sam, this is an RPG, right? Then aren't you supposed to have, like, towns to rest in and shops to buy stuff from? And you would be right. Those do exist in the game, but they exist as colonies, where the soldiers are based out of. Every platoon of soldiers, referred to as a colony, has a giant mech with them called a Pharaonis. And the Pharaonis is essentially supposed to be their biggest weapon, used to fight an enemy Pharaonis from another colony during these skirmishes they have with each other. And the colonies live out of these Pharaonises. They carry their tents and their food and their supplies and everything inside of them during fights. And when they're not in fights, they will set up camps in various places, and they're supposed to be temporary settlements that they'll just kind of be able to pack up and leave at any time. What this means for exploring colonies is that whenever you come across a colony, all the buildings, all the tents and whatever, are going to be the same models you've already seen at previous colonies, because they're all just basically, like, supplied to them from the upper chains of command. And the only thing that you get differently from the, personalities of these various colonies is told to you by the people living in them and the general vibe of the culture. And those, at the very least, are typically very unique from each other, and I much appreciate that. For example, colony, I think it's Sigma on the top left, are a bunch of kind of like deserted soldiers who live in a part of the Wildwoods that no one ever goes to. So they can't kill other soldiers for sustenance. Because, by the way, the soldiers in the war also kind of survive off of the lifeblood of the enemies they kill. It's just kind of like the Pharaonis sucks up their souls, and it's never really discussed how, but that allows them to survive more. But those guys up there have not seen a battle in years, so they've forced themselves to learn how to farm. And that is how they've survived for so long. Farming, by the way, is something that Mobius goes out of its way to not teach the soldiers, because it would give them another way to live that isn't killing other soldiers. Alternatively, you have Colony 30 on the bottom right, which are a bunch of mechanics and Napon, because, yeah, by the way, the Napon are here, that basically just build little Pharaonises called Lebnises, basically little mechs that they can send out and attack soldiers in their stead. And everyone there is super into mechanics and machinery. And, like, that's cool, but overall, it looks the same as Colony 4 above it, or Colony 9 in the middle. Like, if I didn't tell you these characterizations, you would not be able to tell that just looking at them. But if you were in, like, Alba Cabanich from Xenoblade 2, the capital of Morardain, you'd see all the steampunk buildings and the people in, like, overalls and stuff, and all the, like, pollution in the air and the oil spigots in the fields nearby, and you'd know that it's an industrialized nation with a heavy focus on military. Like, there's supposed to be character in the appearance of a settlement, and you don't get any of that from any of these. Now, there is one place in the game that has a lot of character and unique look to it that is the only settlement in the game, and it is the city. I mentioned before, the guy that gave the party their Ouroboros powers told them to go to the city. It is the place where, like, the third party in this world lives to try to take down Mobius. And it's a really cool, like, very densely sci-fi and metal town where a bunch of these, like, people live and live their normal lives. There's, like, art, there's art that people make, there are parks that people can hang out in, There is a shopping district and a canteen and all sorts of like stuff that you would actually see in a normal living, breathing world. And it's clearly supposed to be that when you're here, you're like so relieved to finally have a place that is an actual settlement, an actual like town that you can explore and get a feel for how people live normal lives outside of fighting a war. And sure, it works in that way, but by the time that I got there in my playthrough, I felt so burned by the lack of anything like unique outside of like the different cultures from the various colonies that like I almost wasn't interested enough to really explore this place to its fullest. And the one thing that really caught my eye were the statues of the founders of the city. And I was like, hey, one of these guys looks like Shulk, and another one looks like Rex. I wonder if that means anything. We'll get back to that later. I like the city. I think it's cool, and I appreciate it more having done a lot of research to write this. But, like, I really wish there was more, at least appearance-wise, to the other colonies. Because, like, every one of them is just, we want to kill other people to live, because it's how we live. And then when we're not fighting, like, we still have that on our minds, but occasionally we think about robots, or occasionally we really like our commander, who everyone looks up to and respects. Like, that's actually very common for each of them. Everyone always loves their commander. There's no commander that, like, everyone hates, I think, except for Ashera. But I'm not even going to bother talking about her, I guess. And on top of this, the world is still very caught up in its past. Littered around Ionios are remnants of the previous two games. Little pieces of ruins of recognizable features from Xenoblade 1 and 2 that the players are supposed to point and pog at and basically go like, I remember that place! And I say that that's what they're supposed to do because the characters in the game sure don't talk about them. From the top left and moving to the right, you have the Gates of Fonzamaima on the top left, and below it even more parts of Fonzamaima from Xenoblade 2. Top middle is the Fallen Arm from Xenoblade 1, and beneath that is the very base of the Spirit Crucible Elpis from Xenoblade 2. You guys might remember that as the place where Rex friend-zoned Nia. In the top right picture, you have the kind of podium where people would teleport into Alchemoth, the city of the High Entia, a major part of the game. It's kind of like where the middle of the game all takes place. And the bottom right is just the head of the Bionis, the titan that the entire game took place on. And you see all these things passing by them or in the distance, and just for your information, this is what they look like in the originals. And the characters just never do anything with them. Because to them, they're just parts of the environment that they don't care about. So at that point, like, why have them there besides fan service? It's basically just meaningless and empty. It's cool to see them, but, like, if you're not going to do anything with them, even just have, like, a story moment happen there, because nothing relevant to the story happens at any of those locations. There are two places, though. Two places that have direct story relevance that are used from previous games. One is the Mechonis Sword from Xenoblade 1, and the other one isn't really a place, but it's the concept of Sophronia trees, which were like the main appearance of the inside of the Orion Titan from Xenoblade 2. The Mechonis is the place that the city is hidden in. It is one of those two nodes near the hilt of the sword. And I haven't talked much about Xenoblade 1, but the Mechonis Sword is supposed to be like basically the demilitarized zone between Bionis and Mechonis. Once you get there, it's like crossing a war zone where the enemy is around every corner. It is the most dangerous place in the game you've been to by that point. And in this game instead, it is the only safe haven for Mobius because it houses the city. Meanwhile, you have the Sophronia trees, which aren't really, like, majorly important or anything, but they're used in reference to a character, one of the party members, Tyon, as kind of a representation of his connections to other people. He has flashbacks that he starts to go into detail about a previous CO that he had that basically used them as a way to bond with Tyon, and the two of them would admire them when they weren't fighting, and ultimately she gave his life to protect him, and he still thinks of her every time he sees one. He shares that with Noah at one point, and it kind of becomes a bonding point for them. In the Sophronia trees, this picture is seen in a hidden away colony that you visit in the game as a part of side content, where Tyon runs into a new reborn version of his old CO Nimue, who no longer remembers him, but is still surrounded by the one thing they used to bond over, and Tyon struggles to handle that PTSD. It's a very, very cool thematic element. Now look, I've been pretty negative so far. I've been talking about how I don't like the villains. I think the world is kind of emptied and not a whole lot of was really like story-wise or landmark-wise too great about it. The story's kind of short and nothing really gets to stick around and linger. Like, I've been pretty harsh on this game so far, and I think that's just me being honest. I like this game. I do like Xenoblade 3, but it just doesn't hold up as much in my heart compared to 1 and 2. But that is all not to say that this game has no redeeming qualities or anything. I think it's about time we start talking about the things I genuinely really like about this game. To start off, parts of the story. This game is wonderful with character-like moments. When the gangs from Kevis and Agnes that you play as are introducing themselves to each other, they've just left their colonies that are now trying to kill them. They have this little moment where Noah introduces himself to the other, to the Agnian guys, and he, like, it allows them to each kind of evoke their characters one by one, so you get an idea of who's who and what place they have in the party. Noah's very upfront and formal and very forward with who he is, so that he can kind of, like, get the ball rolling. We get to see Uni, who's very brash and teasing, fuck with Tyon, who's very uptight. And best of all, Lance, who like ends up the last person introducing himself, can barely put together anything he has to say about himself, and instead just acts racistly against the Agnians because he's still not over the brainwashing and conditioning that he's had all his life. Uni, the bird girl healer of the party, suffers PTSD after discovering her own corpse in a battleground that you come across throughout the game. And it kind of puts the fear of God into her after realizing that not only can she die, she has died tons of times by now. And it's handled slowly throughout the game as Tyon, her kind of partner in the party, who does not get along well with her at all, slowly starts to, like, break through to her and kind of, like, bond with her over how they both feel the same way, and he's just been trying to hide it the whole time. There's a lovely scene where Noah and Mio trade their flutes with one another as kind of this mark of how close they've gotten. Mio, of which received her flute from a different Offseer she learned under, so she is trusting that person's legacy further with Noah. And it's kind of this mark of, like, the fact that they've, by this point, fallen in love with each other. I don't want to go into every one of these scenes, but, like, when it comes to character writing and the little things between these stories, like, Xenoblade 3 is great. Okay, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna do the one more scene. When they get to the city, the person kind of just touring them around brings them to a hospital to introduce them to the concept of babies, because they're born at 10 years old, these soldiers, so they don't know what it's like to be even smaller than that. So they go into this hospital room where this mother has just given birth and she's holding her newborn in her arms, and she instructs them on giving their pinky to this baby to hold, as the baby kind of like clutches their little finger in its hand, and all the party is like freaking out about this because they have no idea that this is supposed to be like a tiny little person until it's explained to them, and suddenly they're all crazy about these babies, and a fucking doctor walks into the room and he's like, alright kids, who wants to learn how babies are made?
Oh god.
We don't get to see that scene, but I really wish that we did. Of course, another one of my favorite scenes in this game is the cuckening. I also love how this game writes Nia. A lot of this, the characters and stuff in this game are not pulled from previous games. Like, none of the characters recur at all, despite the fact that it's, you know, built on the two settings of Xenoblade 1 and 2. With two exceptions. The queens of Agnes and Keves are characters from previous games, the Agnian queen of which is Nia, the cat girl from Xenoblade 2. And if you guys might remember, she was like very fucking vulgar and brash and was kind of like the rogue of the party, even though she was the healer. And somehow she's become queen of a nation. So whenever the characters interact with her after they like rescue her, she has to put on a veneer that like she's this really like posh and like well-spoken leader of a country, but it's like so clearly her trying really hard not to disappoint their like idea of what a queen is supposed to act like, that by the point that the final battle comes and her and Melia from the first game, who is the queen of the other side, are basically on a Zoom call trying to talk to each other about how they're going to join the fight, Nia is keeping up this act, and Melia just kind of gives her this look like, look, I've been working with you long enough. I know that that's not how you're supposed to act. If you want to cut loose, this is the time. And she's like, oh, thank God! Lastly, the world's coming apart at the end of the game is probably the only scene in this series that I've genuinely nearly been brought to tears by. Where the two worlds slip apart and the characters are chasing after each other, but the worlds are dragging them apart until they can no longer see each other. It's gut-wrenching, that the ending of this game. On top of this, the main cast, the party, I like them. And I like the villains, N and M, as characters a lot. I kind of want to talk about them for a second. I haven't really given you guys an idea of what these characters are like. You guys want to hear some?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Thanks. So Noah, as a protagonist, he's alright. He's not terrible. Decidedly, he is the spotlight character of the game. He is the narrator. He is the first character that the game follows, even into the flashback cutscene. Personality-wise, he's not quite at the level of the previous protagonists of the series. He's a very stoic guy. He doesn't really show much in the way of emotions, not because he doesn't have them, he's just not a very emotive guy in general. And that's kind of okay, because the rest of the party definitely picks up his slack. In development, they refer to Noah as a warrior poet, so it's not like it's totally out of the question for him to be, like, kind of subdued in the way of personality. He's a pacifist, by the way. Whenever you fight human soldiers, he actually holds his sword in such a way that he hits them with the broadside, rather than the blade, so that he doesn't kill them. You even get to see this in gameplay. If you focus on, like, a machine, a Levnis that's, like, fighting alongside soldiers, you'll see an animation where he turns the sword so that he's holding it blade side out. And if you focus on a human, he'll turn it back so it's broadside out. Speaking of the sword, Noah holds a sword called Lucky 7. That big red sword behind him is actually just a sheath. And inside of it is a smaller metal sword that's kind of just like the length of a katana, not like a huge greatsword. It was entrusted to him by a guy named Riku that we'll talk about in a second. And it's this immensely powerful supernatural blade that can cut through anything. Like, even concepts. It's fucked up. And he has like a special move he'll do with it where he slashes the enemy and you see a line cutting through the ground that goes off into the horizon. It's actually rad. As far as his character development though, his whole thing is that he's just concerned about legacy and people around him dying. He's got a big question he mentions early on that, like, whenever people have given their lives so that he can survive, they always do it with a smile. And he's been weirded out by that his whole life, because, like, you're about to die, why are you smiling? And part of the game is kind of realizing that some people are more appreciative of what they had rather than so tightly white-knuckled holding on to the things they still have. He doesn't really feel like he develops especially noticeably as a character, besides falling in love with Mio. But in reference to the whole knowing when to give up on something, is something that he has great in dichotomy with N. I mentioned that N is basically the evil version of Noah. He is a past life that Noah led. It turns out that every time Noah is reborn, Mio is reborn alongside him, and they always meet and they always fall in love. And N was one such life, where they actually even had a kid and escaped to the city to raise him. Mio is 1 year older than Noah, so she passed away first. And after Noah in that life died, he was stood before Zed, who convinced him that if he became Mobius and, you know, gave up on this whole fucking living for somebody else sort of thing, he would bring back his Mio, and the two of them could live forever together as Mobius. And he accepted the deal, and that's why N and M are a thing. And as a character, even just watching him is one of the coolest antagonists the series has. He's evil, but not in the way that the other Mobius are. He's not, like, laughing at the misfortune and the pain and the torture that the people around him are suffering under. N is cold-blooded and just a killer. He is the perfect embodiment of that whole, like, never letting go of the past, never moving on sort of thing that the game is trying to go for. He is that dichotomy with Noah, who slowly realizes that, like, sure, it's nice to have people that you loved and live a life, but, like, eventually it's going to be lost, and that's okay. N feels reminiscent of Jin from Xenoblade 2, but in such a way that it's not just a copy-paste, not the way that D and J are just Metal-Face from Xenoblade 1. And I really do feel for him as a character. I understand why he made the decisions he did, why he would feel so devoted to his significant other that he would be willing to basically sell his humanity to spend more time with her. Also the cuckening.
Wait, that's fun.
Beside them are Mio and M. Mio is hard to describe. She's not just like a single tropey anime girl. She feels like a much broader character than Noah. We see a lot more scenes where she's like blatantly emotive and expressing her thoughts on things. There's a scene where her hair has suddenly grown like 2 or so feet longer. And she's into it. She thinks it's pretty, but she hates the fact that she has to, like, spend so much time washing it and taking care of it. And she pulls the other 2 girls in the party aside and, like, I need to ask you guys something serious. And, like, oh no, what's going on? And she's like, I want to get rid of this hair. And they're like, that's it? I mean, sure, yeah, let's hash this out. And they just go from, like, really confused to kind of feeling for her situation. There's a scene where some Mobius are accosting the characters, and Mio is so fed up with them by this point, she literally just walks up and punches them in the face, and they go flying like 70 feet away. It's great. She has a bunch of great little moments of, like, showing that she's, like, not just a trope or, like, a fictional being. She's a character with thoughts. And her whole shtick is that she's only got so much time left. She has a diary that she checks off each day, so that she knows exactly what day she'll die. And her arc is kind of going from really uncomfortable and worried about that time coming to accepting that, you know, she had the time that she had and she's leaving behind people that can carry on without her, that she cares for. She's all about coming to terms with her own death, which is something I vibe with very heavily as a character writing. M, meanwhile, she's pretty damn rad as kind of like a plot twist in the game. She's side with Mobius, obviously, but turns out she's been kind of playing them the whole time, and has been slowly trying to find ways to subvert Mobius and help the people taking them down. Noah was the one who was turned into N in a past life and convinced to basically bring her back to life in exchange for his servitude. Mio never agreed to being Mobius, so she's never been cool with the idea. So this version of her has been slowly plotting to end Mobius from the inside. This kind of gives her a very different vibe as an antagonist. She never does anything like too overtly evil besides just fighting the protagonists. And whenever she's on screen and facing you down, it's just like she's there on business. This is what she's supposed to do and what she's got to do, but like she's not like going out of her way to make anyone suffer, and just kind of making sure that she wins whatever fight she's in. She's very pragmatic, and I appreciate that. She also has by far the coolest mechanic that this game has ever seen in a boss fight. M's got a special ability where she can swap bodies with people and mind control people. And it's presented in a cutscene first where she's swapping between members of your party over and over and over again, and there's a ton of infighting because they don't know whose body she's in and they gotta knock her out of them. So like, she possesses Mio, who attacks Noah, and then possesses Noah, who attacks Uni, possesses Tyon, who Uni goes to knock him out so that she can free him from M, and he's like, no, it's not me, she switched over, and she's like, okay, then who is it? And Tyon hits her in the back of the head, and he's like, I lied, idiot. It's great. I love M. She's just really cool to see on screen. And she has this great fucking crazy plan that I'll talk about later in a scene called The Cuckening. Meanwhile, you got your other characters in the party. You got Tyon. He's a nerd. I like him a lot, though. You have a character with a cool long scarf, and I'm gonna like them. It's just the rules. His whole shtick is that he's had a bunch of people basically give their lives to make sure that he survives and continues living in their stead. So by the time that he's met the group of Agnians he's with now, and eventually the rest of Ouroboros, he's so standoffish because he doesn't want to give people the chance to connect with them, because he's like, they're just going to kill themselves for me again. He's kind of the team strategist, very much so a pragmatist and a pessimist in the group. He's the voice of reason for most of the arguments that they have. And he tries so hard to keep himself reserved, but he's got these little paper dolls that are kind of like his weapons. He throws them at people. They're called Mondo, and they kind of are sentient. I love that whenever he's like trying to act aloof or estranged in one of these scenes, there's usually a Mondo on his shoulder that is evoking the emotion that he's actually having deep down. So like in the scene where he's introducing himself to the rest of the cast, he's like, I'm Tyon, I was their like strategist and healer on this side of the team, but screw you guys, you're just a bunch of Kavesi that are gonna leave us behind to die at some point, I bet it. And you have the, he like turns away to not look at them anymore because he's just mad at Kavesi for existing. And the little Mondo on his shoulder like looks at him and looks back and kind of like wiggles at the rest of the party because it like wants to get along with them. He feels like he's got some great character development throughout the game because Uni is kind of his partner from the other side of the Ouroboros team. And she is this like vulgar and teasing like kind of jerk. She's great. She's like the character that all the fans of the game love because she's just really fun to watch. And her and Tyon have a great dynamic where he's just like, he's the standoffish, quiet nerd dude, and she's like the really outspoken, like flustering, fucking. She's very, very British. All right, there's no better way to put it. So like he struggles so hard dealing with her because everything she does makes him want to hate her until he comes around so much on it that he's basically in love with her. Same goes vice versa. She is very bad at expressing herself to him, but like it's clear they have a thing for each other. Yudi is great because she's just so abrasive with people. All the NPCs and like randos that you end up running into across the way, if she's like the center character that they focus on, it's always because she hates them. There's just like people that you'll come across that she just does not get along with, and it's great watching her have to deal with people that she just can't stand. And of course, the PTSD stuff I mentioned before makes for a great, like, serious way to explore her character, because she clearly lashes out in such a way that she is, like, very teasing and aggressive, but she's very uncomfortable with how she's actually still alive to this day. Meanwhile, you have Lanz and Senna. Lanz is your meathead of the group. If you played any other RPG where you have a big, strong guy who maybe isn't quite so smart, and the rest of the party then spends the entire game kind of treating him like the butt of every joke, then you've seen Lanz. I still like him, even if he kind of has that problem where everyone kind of dogs on him out of nowhere, especially Tyon. But I do really love his characterization outside of that. He is super unconfident with himself. He has let people die in the past, so he's basically sworn to himself that he'll do everything he can to protect the people he's with now, even if he doesn't have the faith that he can actually pull it off. And I especially love a scene of his where right after the group has decided to go traveling together, and he's spent the previous conversation talking about how much he still hates Agnians and he doesn't trust the other people in the party. And then the fucking moment that Noah wakes up, he looks up to see Lanz and Senna doing Tai Chi and screaming at each other. Like, literally just shouting, not speaking, just going, ah! Because they saw Noah and Neo fuse the previous day, and they're like, maybe we can do it. Senna, meanwhile, is kind of a non-character. That's harsh. That's really not true. But, like, her whole character is uplifting other characters. She also has the same sort of confidence problems that Lanz has, which is why they get along so well. But she is so much in the shadow of people around her that she struggles to even define herself. She's upbeat, she's strong, and she lives to make other people look better and not her. This is why she's hanging out with Mio. She wants Mio to live a better life, so she does everything to make Mio's life better without doing anything for herself. This is a cool characterization, but it does make for a character that feels like she's just there to make other characters look cooler and not do stuff herself. Even her own side story, which is a section of the side quests you can do, ends up turning into someone else's story that is just labeled as Senna's. I like these two guys, maybe not quite as much as the other two, which sucks because Lanz looks so cool. But I do love that they both grapple with their confidence issues and bond over it, which culminates in probably one of the sickest scenes in the game, where in a losing battle against N and M, they fuse together into a big form and try to drag N away into basically a suicide tactic, where they're going to explode and take him out with them, because that's, to them, they think it's the only thing that they can trust themselves to be good enough to pull off. It doesn't work, by the way, but after that they start to really realize that, like, that was a stupid idea and they should live for today and actually just be better rather than killing themselves because they think they're not good enough. On top of those two, there are also these two Nopon that are with the party. There's Riku on the Kavesi side and Manana on the Agnian side. They're with these parties from the get-go, but they don't have nearly as much screen presence. Riku is just a mysterious fellow. He's got an extremely deep voice, and I don't really know what's up with him. He's got a bunch of weird questions that he keeps raising where he clearly knows more than he lets on. He gave Noah his crazy sword. So, like, where did he get that? Why is it capable of cutting through reality? Why did he have it? Why did he feel like Noah was the only person that, like, deserved to take it? What the fuck do you know? What are you? Why are you immortal? Why are you in past cutscenes where we can see they take place 1,000 years ago and you're still there? And Manana cooks. That's about all I got for her.
You forgot that Riku's a funny little guy.
He's a funny little guy!
He's the best character.
Yeah, he's great. I wish I could show you a clip of his voice, but I'm not talking about voice acting. Because believe it or
You
not...
gotta tell him about our reaction to this first cutscene.
Yes, Riku fucking does not speak for the first like 3 hours of the game, despite you seeing him alongside Noah and his party, and we're like, what is up with this random Nopon that's just following us around? And then like out of nowhere, a voiced cutscene comes along where he speaks for the first time, and he's super deep throated, like he's really low, and it's like, what the fuck? Like the last two Nopon we had in the party were like so high pitched and nasally. One of them was a 10-year-old boy. What the hell is wrong with this guy?
Also, that's a hat, right?
I don't know. I don't know anything about Riku, okay?
I just realized he's holding the gun with his ear.
Yeah, actually it's a wing, but yes. So enough about characters, let's talk gameplay, finally. I haven't talked about how this game fucking plays yet.
Epic.
Here's some basics about the game here. Broadly, Xenoblade 3 plays like Xenoblade 2. It has a limited number of arts, and the movement feels closer to Xenoblade 2, specifically because of the auto attacks. In Xenoblade 1, if you moved around, characters would auto attack pretty much whenever they felt like it. There was no real good way to tell what rhythm at which they would swing. But meanwhile in 2, characters would only auto attack if they were standing still, and they would do so in clear combos of 3 like attacks. By the way, can I just pause this for a second? Ted, do we know if Jen is back yet?
Yeah, she's here.
Okay, cool. Anyway. So, Xenoblade 3's auto attacks are kind of the worst of both worlds. You can't auto attack when you're moving, like Xenoblade 2, but attacks really only come out randomly, like in Xenoblade 1, when you're not moving. So, you can never really trust when your character is going to do normal attacks, just because there's no way to judge. Xenoblade 2 had a great little side tech you could do called stutter stepping, where every time you flicked the control stick, the character would interrupt their attack action or animation and move, and then as soon as you stop moving, they'd start attacking again. So you could just hash out a bunch of really rapid attacks doing that. You can't do that in Xenoblade 3, and it's kind of annoying. Meanwhile, it is the same 3-art kind of setup on the bottom of the screen as Xenoblade 2 had, although you have 2 sets of 3 arts. The ones on the right are the arts of your current character class, because by the way, this game has classes. And the ones on the left are ones you can equip alongside it from other classes. I'll talk about this a little more in detail later. Xenoblade 1 and 2 had 2 different methods for charging up your arts, because they're not like charged when you start a fight. In Xenoblade 1, they were just cooldowns, so you'd use an art and then you'd have to wait for it to recharge. In Xenoblade 2, you'd get a little bit of recharge for every auto attack you did. And both of these methods are present in the game for different arts. Circular arts, which are for Kavesi classes, use the original Xenoblade 1 method of cooldown, while the diamond-shaped Agnian arts use the auto attack recharge, because they're from the world of 1 and 2, which is really fucking sick. On top of that, talent arts, which are like super moves essentially, are back from Xenoblade 1. So every class has its own special, like, cool new crazy move that it can do that is charged up by doing things your class is supposed to do, such as grabbing aggro as tanks, or healing as a healer, or doing critical hits as a DPS. Debuffs are back in full force. They were not in Xenoblade 2, and now they're a huge presence in the game. And by a huge presence, I mean mostly on you. You can never reliably do debuffs to the enemy, and it's annoying. Driver combos and shit are back, so knocking enemies on their ass is back and better than ever. There's 2 paths you can take enemies down with different results depending on if you hit them with Smash or the new Burst like debuff, which is just really interesting and great to add to the game. And gems, which are like accessories or stat ups or materia or whatever you want to call them. They factor into your character building, and it's nice. But the new stuff this game implements, stuff like fusion arts. How well can you guys see the text of the arts on the screen?
I can make it out. I can like read it.
Okay. If anyone can't, I will read them anyway. Just as examples, the arts on the tops of both dials are Glow Ring and Ground Beat. Glow Ring locks the enemy's aggro on you, and Ground Beat is a damaging move that has an AoE. You can hold down a trigger, and it'll fuse any arts you have that are next to each other. So those 2 top arts are next to each other, they'll fuse into one art, and you can use them to do a move that both locks the target's aggro on you and does AoE damage with a multiplier because you're doing both of them at the same time. And that's one of the major gameplay mechanics of the game. You can dash around in the game by clicking the stick, which is great for repositioning. A lot of moves now have rings that you put on the ground that are basically AoEs that you can stand in for buffs. And probably the biggest, craziest things in the game are the fact that you can swap your character mid-fight, which is the thing I have been begging for these games to add since Xenoblade 1. There are also Ouroboros forms and stuff, which I'll discuss in a second, and character classes. But to me, probably the most annoying change they've added to the game is the fact that now you have to hold down a button to revive fallen party members. Which doesn't sound crazy, but it's capitalized with the fact that only healers can do it. So if you don't have any healers on your team, you cannot revive dead party members. This is made the worst when your healers go down. So you had people that could heal you, and now you're fucked. It's the worst changes this game makes, and leads to the most wipes in the game. Now, there is one more feature that they added to this game that's kind of unique, probably the game's claim to fame. All 6 of your party members are on screen and attacking together at once. There is no, there's no mechanic where you have to bring, party members out from the bench and put them on so you can play with them. Every member of your team is present at all times. This means the game has over double the traditional party size, when taken into account that you can also have a 7th additional party member on screen fighting with you.
Oh my.
This means that fights become fucking impossible to parse. Because there's so much shit going on, and so many enemies doing tons of crazy things because they're trying to hit as hard and as many people as possible. The game is balanced in such a way to make this not like a huge fucking travesty, but it also changes the kind of the name of the game in a lot of weird ways. Particularly, does anyone know what a cleave is from an MMO?
Like a shockwave?
Kinda, yeah. Cleaves, as far as I'm familiar with them from Final Fantasy XIV, basically refers to normal attacks that enemies will do that deal like a cone of damage in front of them to encourage tanks to guide the enemy away from their party so that the party can do the normal fighting. Enemies have a lot of cleaves in this game because they want every party member to feel like they're being challenged in a fight. If one tank pulls an enemy away, then the rest of the party would then be able to just kind of beat up the enemy and never go challenged. The problem with this is that's what tanks are supposed to do in these games. So it makes tanks feel less useful when their party is still taking damage even though the tank is holding aggro. This is made even stranger because tanks usually have a little ring around them that if you stand in it gives you a defense up. But why would you stand next to a tank if they're getting attacked by AoEs? On top of that, healing is very impersonal in this game. Every healing move is an AoE, or it's one of those ring fields you put on the ground that people have to stand in to get healed by. So you can never specifically heal one party member at a time. Which isn't a huge deal, but it's definitely something I noticed in the game and made playing a healer feel a lot less involved. Because if Noah is weak and you're playing as Uni and she's a healer right now, then you just pop an AoE and hope that that was enough for Noah to get. When it's just you didn't only mean it for him, it's going to heal everybody. So maybe you should save the art in case other people need healing, which could mean that Noah's going to go down. This is especially weird because of the 9 healer classes in the game, only 4 of them have an on-command healing art. The rest of them either have attacks that heal when they deal damage or placeable rings on the ground that give regeneration. So let's say you're playing as one of those non-on-command healing classes and one of your characters needs health, then you better either A, hope that your on-damage heal actually lands, because if it misses then it won't heal anybody, and enemies in this game can dodge attacks like motherfuckers, Or you put a ring field on the ground and either hope to God that the NPC AI knows to stand in it, or swap your character over to the guy to make sure he does, which could mean that he's far enough away from the fight that he can't do anything. Worst of it all to me is the fact that because there are now 7 party members in a fight, you have less of a perceived contribution in and of yourself. You never really are going to be doing so much damage as Noah that, like, you'll realize it on the enemy's health bar, because they have so much health to take into account that they're being attacked by 7 guys at the same time. This is unlike the previous games where, like, if you had one party member that was geared to be the damage of the party and them alone, they would basically be the one that carries the enemy's health from 100 to 0. It's not like a huge deal, it's just the name of the game. But it's something that kind of made these fights feel worse to me, because I never had any reason to, like, specifically do, like, this one move or anything, because it was only going to do so much damage. I mentioned the whole thing about healers being the only ones to res people, so I don't need to talk about that. But the big thing to know about that is that in previous games, there was a gauge on the top of the screen that you could either spend to revive people, or, if it was maxed out, do a crazy super move called a chain attack. And now, because there's so many people in the field, they detached reviving people from that gauge. So now there's no other reason to have the party gauge besides for chain attacks. And I will talk about that in a second. Now, characters in general also have fewer prepared moves called arts than ever before. Noah, if you're just playing as, it doesn't matter, any of them, they're only going to have 6 arts and a talent art that they can use in a fight ever. This is in comparison to the 8 arts and a talent art in Xenoblade 1, or 9 arts across various weapons in Xenoblade 2, not including the specials that they can use. And it kind of makes these characters feel like they can do less in a fight. And by far the worst of all, I want you all to remember the Nintendo Switch was released in 2017. And this is what fights in Xenoblade 3 look like. When things get rough in this game, the game will reduce its resolution to avoid performance issues. It's never terrible, but it's always at least a little bad. And when there's so many numbers and so many effects and shit going on the screen everywhere, it can lead the game to become very difficult to parse. And I just can't excuse that. Like, I like this game's combat, and I like the enemies and all the cool shit going on, but, like, there had to be something to be done about this. And that thing to be done is reduce the amount of party members on screen. Now, character classes. Here's the real meat and potatoes of how to build a character in this game. It's the class that they pick. How classes work is that every character in the game starts with one. Noah is a sword fighter. Mio is a Zephyr. That's the name of their, like, tanking double chakram class and shit like that. And I'll talk in a sec how they gain more classes, but every character in the game can play as the same classes across the board if they're all maxed out. Classes contain all of your moves, all of your passive skills, and determine the fusion arts you can use. So every class in the game is either an Agnian or a Kavesi class, because that's just which characters they come from. If you have a Kavesi class, then you can equip Agnian moves for fusion arts, while it's the vice versa for Agnian classes. I have a huge issue, just personally, with the fact that every class is the same no matter which character you equip it on. I love the games for having every character feel different to use. Even in Xenoblade 2, if you had the same weapon on 2 different characters, let's say it's the fucking twin rings on Rex and Nia, the 2 characters still played differently, even if they were using the same blade as each other. For example, Nia had an on-command heal with that move, while Rex had moves that would, like, recharge his moves if he hit critical hits. Like, they were vastly different even if they were using the same weapon. But in this case, every character is exactly the same no matter what. I will take this time to remind you again, only healers can revive fallen party members. So, across your 6 characters and a bonus character, you probably want at least 2 healers, just in case someone goes down. And beyond all those issues I have, this system just comes with all the other problems any other job system is packaged with. If you've played any game with a job system, you know the ones I'm talking about. If you finish leveling a class finally, like you've gone from level 1 to 10 as Noah's Sword Fighter, congrats, the Sword Fighter is now really strong, but you're obligated to swap to another lower level class, because that would be a waste of time to use the strong Sword Fighter class and not be leveling up another one. There's only one way for characters to gain new classes, and that is to fight alongside another character that is currently using that class. So if you want Mio to become a sword fighter, you need to have Noah be a sword fighter until she gains enough experience fighting alongside him to use the class herself. So if you have a character who is maxed out with sword fighter and another character who doesn't have it yet, you need to have that person have sword fighter on them to be able to give it to the other person until they're ready. This is a very rare edge case, but it's still a problem with this system. And some of these classes just feel better to play than others. It's especially apparent with some of the healers. Fucking Miyabi's Troubadour class, which I'm not going to go into detail who or what that means, just feels better to play than any other healer class, just because of the stuff that it does. Or like fucking Fiona's, I don't even remember what the hell her class is, but it's all about giving your teammates buffs. So you're just like throwing out every move you have and dealing shit tons of buffs to your allies, and it's gonna feel way better than like the other healer class that's just about damage on leading to healing passively to your party, when it's just not enough to really like steer the momentum of a fight. Or you just have some DPS classes that deal so much goddamn damage that you compare them to the other classes in the game, and it's just like, why would I bother using fucking Yumsmith when Seraph deals billions of damage? Yes, there is a class in this game called Yumsmith. And also of note is the fact that every character in the game that you play as has different base stats from each other, which would influence the classes you pick to use on them, such as one character's dexterity, meaning that they're good with, like, I don't know, landing hits or something, would be more reliable if you put it on Full Metal Jaguar, which is another class in the game, that gets stronger for every consecutive hit you land. But their stat differences are so negligible that I never realized that this was a mechanic, and that I might as well have just not given a fuck about who had each class. Now, I said how you trade classes to each other, so like Sword Fighter being used alongside Mio and she gains Sword Fighter, but your characters only start with one class each. How do you get new classes added to your pool? The answer is heroes. Heroes are those bonus 7th party members I've mentioned before. Every once in a while, be it in the main story or on a side quest, you will come across an objective that if you complete it, they will grant you a hero, a new character that can join you in the battle. Please don't look at the menu, they have terrible spoilers. There are characters on the hero menu that you would know either as aggressively against your interests as a character, or dead. Which means that since they're on the list, they're either going to do like a heal phase turn, or come back to life, or whatever the hell is the case in this game. 2 characters specifically are on that list that I think should not have been there. Congratulations, welcome to Spoiler Town. Again, having heroes on the field means 7 characters on the field at once. The Switch was released in 2017, and they are probably one of the biggest reasons that the game performs the way it does. Because they're throwing out a whole other character's worth of effects and moves and calculations into the fight. And they are part of the reason why these fights are so difficult to parse and feel like they are difficult to contribute to. The weirdest thing of all is that these characters have classes that they will then give you for having them in the party. For example, Ethel on the bottom has the Flash Fencer class. And when you get her in the party, Noah gains the Flash Fencer class, and by fighting alongside the two of them, they can slowly give that class to the other members of the party. But for some reason, Ethel fights with different arts than Noah does, despite them being the same class. It's almost like that exact problem I just said I had with this game's class system, where every character feels the same, is not true for the characters you can't play as. Because you can't control heroes. You can only control your base 6 party members, and the 7th bonus guy is just an NPC that fights with you. I can't believe I forgot to mention that by this point. Now, what this means is that... Well, sorry, not what that means. But there is another issue that is attached with this hero mechanic. And that is the fact that this game basically starts you, after the intro, chapter of the game, with your entire party that you will have for the rest of the game. You will not be playing through this game and unlock new party members the way any other RPG does, which is neat. But it also means that there's no mystique on who's going to become playable, because, you're not going to run into an antagonist who's like, oh, I bet that guy's going to come around and, have a cool character arc alongside us, like Morag or Zeke or something. Instead, it's just you have Noah, Uni, Lance, Senna, Tyon, and Mio, and that's it. Good job, you have your whole party. So, heroes are meant to fill that void of, I hope we get new cool characters to meet and recruit throughout the game. They're very clearly kind of implemented for that sole gameplay purpose of having new stuff to do with your party, so that you don't just get bored of the 6 that you had from the start. However, the process for gaining them is kind of hilarious, because it's always obvious when you're going to get a new guy. Either the base game shows you a cool new character and starts a quest in the main quest line that is marked as a hero quest, so you know that you're going to get a new character by the end of it, or you see it on the map that there's a yellow quest over there rather than a blue, so you know it's going to result in a hero, so you might as well go over and get your new gameplay mechanic so you can finally start getting on with the story again. Something weird that I found, though, with the characters that you can recruit, is that if they are soldiers from Agnes or Keves, you will always only recruit commanders from the various colonies you come across. Ethel is the commander of Colony 4, for instance. None of the new party members you ever get are anything else. There are never any foot soldiers, there are never anyone with, any other unique position in the military. They are always the leader of a colony. This isn't really, a problem, but, it's just something I found bizarre. What's cool about them, though, and because enough negativity, every one of these characters has their own quests to unlock them, and typically other side quests involving them that lead to their own personal storylines. However, these are always usually related to the consuls from these colonies that they're from, and will pretty much always lead to a fight with a Mobius at the end, because the Mobius is pissed that the colony has allied with Ouroboros and is going to be doing something about it. Examples of this are Juniper, who you don't fight the Mobius of her colony when you first encounter her. Sorry, them. But playing along Juniper's plotline slowly reveals that Mobius only visits once a year or so. By the time that they come back, they just want to be sadistic assholes again, and you beat them up and Juniper's colony is fully freed. Surprise, no real shocker there. But this leads me to my biggest problem with heroes. And I'm going to talk about this for a bit here. Heroes are anathema to the game's plotline. They are basically a distinct entity that does not get any bearing on the plot whatsoever, and it turns into a huge misuse of these characters. When you encounter a new character that will become a hero throughout the game's plotline, its main plot, not its side content, that means that character that little section of the game is about will afterwards be able to join your party at any time and need to be called on from the menu to do so reliably whenever you want them to do it. Take Valdi, for instance. He's the gray-faced guy in the middle of that second picture. He's this little kid, he's a healer, he's a mechanic. He's alright, I like Valdi. You encounter him along the way across the tablelands of the Raybell area, and when you meet him, he accosts you for a second, and then finds out that his little robot friend that he brought along with him got broken, and Mobius comes to pick him up and take him back to the colony. So you go and rescue Valdi from the Mobius, and after that point, Valdi is never allowed to interact with the plot again, because he needs to be reliably, call-onable at any time. Does that make sense? And this is by far the worst displayed with Ethel on the bottom. Ethel is well, we'll talk about Ethel in a second. So instead, take this graphic. This is every character I could come up with in the game that plays some bearing in the plot in some miscellaneous way. Because of heroes having their own little one-off moments in the game, this game feels like it lacks real side characters that you recurringly meet along the way, because all the cool characters you run into are one and done. It also means that any recurring antagonists kind of just get to be themselves and not have any sort of twist to them besides him, but that's neither here nor there. The real big thing about it to me is the fact that heroes just kind of limit this game's side cast because they have to be part of a mechanic that prevents them from interacting with the main plot in any major way. So if this is the whole cast of side characters I could come up with in this game, here is how many of them are heroes. Of the proper side characters, 5 of them are heroes. Ethel, Nia, fucking Riku, Gondor, and Monica. What this means is that if they're ever off needing to do something for the plot, then you cannot use them in the party, which limits your gameplay. Meanwhile, you have the one-off characters that are heroes, which means that they get their one-and-done story, and then allows them to be usable through the menus at any time, which then limits their presence in the story. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And then on the right, there's all the miscellaneous heroes that you have to encounter on your own that aren't part of the story. But there are a bunch of really cool characters that I like that I would have loved to run into through the story and have little side plots that allow you to explore them over the course of time. But you just can't. Because they're just here for a gameplay mechanic. And that really makes me feel bad for these characters, because a lot of them are really fucking cool, but they get shafted because they have to interact with this one gameplay mechanic, and prevents them from, fleshing out the character in such a way that I would be able to experience them with all the major plot elements going on, and not, some side content excuse plot that I, interact with once and that's it. I mentioned before, this is shown best with Ethel. So let's talk about Ethel for a second. This is Ethel. Ethel is the commander of Colony 4. She's badass, everyone in her colony respects her and looks up to her, and she has this rivalry with a commander from another colony on Agnes' side of the war, named Kamaravi. General of Colony 4, rival with Kamaravi. The thing about Ethel is that she has such a deep-seated rivalry with Kamaravi that they basically, they barely even met and spoke, but they care about this rivalry, and the two of them push each other to do better and fight better and be better. So during a battle, when Ethel had a chance to finally kill Kamaravi, she let him go so that she could fight him again. They're basically Goku and Vegeta. For this discretion, or whatever, the upper ranks of the Kavesi military, read Mobius, dropped her colony's rank into the dirt to punish her for not doing what they ask, which is killing other people. eventually, the party comes across Colony 4 while they're dirt rank, and Consul K shows up to try to mind control them into killing the party, and the party saves the colony by killing K and freeing them from their control. At this point, Ethel temporarily joins the party. She becomes the first hero the game introduces you to the concept with by joining you here. But it says that it's temporary from the moment that you start having her in the party. So you know she's just gonna leave. Eventually, Ethel is called away to answer for her transgressions at Keves Castle, and she departs from your party, and you no longer have a hero in your party to work with. An hour or so later of gameplay, Riku and Manana, the two Nopon that are in your party and have been following you around for a while, finally become heroes and join you as characters that fight on screen with you. This is really bizarre to me, because Riku and Manana have been there from the start. They should have been the first heroes that you get, so you are introduced to the concept with one that you can reliably keep in your party, and then Ethel comes along to introduce the fact that other ones could be brought along and have new classes to give your characters. Anyway, Ethel and Kamaravi are brought to Keves Castle, and they are forced to fight the party a couple hours later in gameplay. I say a couple, it's like 10. And in that moment, they attack the party, are beaten, they rebel against their control, and decide that they want to spend their last moments with each other doing what they love and know best, which is killing each other. And the two of them die in combat against each other. It's a weirdly touching moment. It's basically a sex scene. It is the most fuck fighting I've ever seen. It's pretty cool, and it really sold the characters to me. Ethel and Kamaravi stuck with me hard after that point. You're left with the Flash Fencer class from Ethel, so Noah can still transfer it to other members of your party, but, fucking Ethel can't be there to speed up the process anymore, so your gameplay with the Flash Fencer is a little limited until you finally manage to get it to your other party members. It's your only remnant that this character ever existed. Hours of gameplay pass. I'm talking a long time. Ethel is later reborn from her cradle and comes to live in the city, which stole those cradles to make more people that the city could rely on as soldiers. She is reborn as a 10-year-old rather than the 19 or so year old that you see in the game. And fucking eventually, way more hours of gameplay pass after you see this. By the way, Ethel living as a child in the city does not join your party. She's not a hero in the game. Way more hours of gameplay pass. Kamaravi is then revived from the dead by Colony Omega, another group you come across later. And after you beat them up, he goes to live in the city too, and becomes Ethel's father figure. Which is all kinds of uncomfortable. After that, you can do some side quests where you learn about their lives now, because they still feel some lingering attachment to each other, but they don't know why, because they don't have any memories. And eventually Ethel, who has always been kind of a wild child at this point, decides to go to Colony Omega because they have a device that will age her up to the way that she was before when you first encountered her in the game. You have the choice of whether or not to let Ethel age up. If you say yes, she will rejoin you as a hero the way that she always was when you first encountered her, hours and hours deep into the game. This is side content, by the way. If you say no, nothing happens. You just leave her as a kid. There is no gameplay ramification for saying no. All it is just choosing to deny her of her desire to help you out in combat, even if it means burning away most of her lifespan. Why?
Essentially, it's just delaying it until you say yes, right?
Yeah, you can come back and say yes later, because they want you to have this character in your party if you want to have a Flash Fencer, or specifically Ethel's version of Flash Fencer, which plays differently than any of the player characters. It's they're trying to make this game's, plot and the stories that it's telling interesting to these characters, and they are interesting, but they're intervening with gameplay in such a way that your only choice in this critical moral decision is to say yes, so you have more gameplay to work with. I'm going to say something controversial here. This series has done this exact idea, having cool characters you can encounter and recruit to your party that tell unique stories, that are divorced from the main plot in a non-awkward way, that are diverse and interesting and unique and cool. And it's Blades from Xenoblade 2. The gotcha fucking mechanic. The only thing that's making it worse than the heroes of Xenoblade 3 is the fact that it's a gotcha system. If you if you did quests to gain specific blades, or if fucking Cosmos from Xenoblade 2 dropped from a specific super boss and you knew that if you beat it you'd get access to her and her cool plot lines, then the blades would have been a slam fucking dunk of a mechanic in Xenoblade 2. That's the only problem that they have. The fact that they're these pre-established temporarily live creatures that exist alongside their drivers or whatever is a cool way to divorce them from the main plot, because they are explicitly their own unique thing that is not relevant to the main stuff going on. And the only reason that the heroes of Xenoblade 3 are so tied to the main plot is because there's nothing else going on in Ionios. There is a war and that's it! Now look, the fact that they added all of these cool characters to join you in combat, especially Ethel being the first one. I remember when I first saw Ethel in the game and fought against her, and I thought she was so fucking cool. And then the game's like, hey, guess what? Ethel's joining your party. I hadn't been spoiled of that mechanic in this game yet. I was radio silent on promotional material for Xenoblade 3. I saw that and I popped off. Because she's so fucking cool. So really, heroes as a concept are still rad, and I like the fact that they're in the game and that all this work is put into giving not just a ton of classes in the game, but a bunch of characters that you take them from is super cool. And I want to spend some time to appreciate the coolest ones in my opinion. Ethel and Kamaravi, Gray, Gondor, Monica, and Sagiri. Gray, Gondor, and Monica in the middle are not members of the war. They are soldiers from the city. And they are fighting against Mobius to free the world. So they tell very different stories than the other heroes that you come across. They don't involve Mobius. They involve their own specific wants and desires. Monica's side quest is about how the Vandom that you met at the beginning of the game was her husband. And now that he's dead, she's still mourning his loss and still wishes that he could be here fighting alongside them, but she knows that he gave her life to the cause they all fight for. And there is a point in that quest line where you're doing it with her, where one of the soldiers in her platoon, I'm not gonna say starts coming onto her, but he's he's trying to be someone for her now that she's no longer wed, and she's very weirded out by it, but it's hard to describe. It's just a very strange plot line that this game suddenly gets to throw at you because you have characters that aren't just fucking child soldiers. Yeah, I like the heroes. I like Gondor.
Kamaravi's really fucking cool.
I like Kamaravi. I like all these guys, yeah. Ouroboros. I've said a couple of times the characters in this game can merge together. I wanted to cover this this sooner, but I got to the gameplay section here kind of late. During the game, at any point in the fight, you can merge two of your party members into one super party member. They're specific pairs. Noah and Mio, Uni and Tyon, Lance and Senna. They gain new powerful arts. They lose a health bar, it turns into an overheat bar instead that'll pop you out once it's full. And there's two versions for every pair. So there's a Noah version of the Noah-Mio fusion and a Mio version of that. This mechanic is neat, but I kind of forgot about its existence a lot, despite it being the main crux of the plot. there's like skill trees you can upgrade that are really the only unique way to like level up and build your characters that the other characters can't have. And the more you do fusion arts, the stronger they get in combat. It's supposed to kind of feed into the gameplay loop, but I just felt like they didn't really have a good place in the gameplay loop, so despite being so plot relevant and kind of the game's big like eye-catching trailer candy, they just kind of were forgotten about to me. Because instead, the game's real thing that feels like it's like the god of your new combat world is chain attacks. Chain attacks are a recurring mechanic from every one of these games. Xenoblade 1, 2, 3, X, they all... Actually, no, X doesn't have chain attacks. But they're all unique. Xenoblade 1, they're very fire and forget. You fill up the party gauge, and about a third of it can be used to revive a party member, or the whole thing can be used to do the chain attack. Same goes for Xenoblade 2. And they're all, like, pretty simple, but, like, something that you take into account as kind of the culmination of the gameplay loop of those games. Xenoblade 3, chain attacks are your new god. How they work is thus, because I want you to understand how complicated these things are in this game. It is best phrased as an extremely regimented card game. You hit the button once the chain attack is ready to go, and the game pauses. The top screen is what you'll see once that happens. You'll see these things called chain orders, where a member of your party is shown on the screen. And picking one of them means that once you fill up a meter, by doing other moves as other characters, then the character that you chose will be able to do a super move that will debuff the enemy permanently in some way, and do a ton of damage. The example there is Taion, who would reduce the enemy's physical defense by 50 points for finishing his move. So after you pick Taion, it shows you all of your party members in a row. They're basically like cards in a hand that you're able to play. And each of them is worth a different number of points, and depending on their class in the game, either healer, tank, or DPS, they gain different like bonuses for using them at different times. Let's say that you use like a DPS first, then it would give you more points towards the meter you gotta fill. Healers cannot fill the meter, that's their special thing, so you can cap it off at 99. And then every time you use one of these guys, they're basically put in a graveyard, but if you use a tank at the end to fill the meter, then it'll revive someone from the graveyard with more points. Which means that they'll be able to fill up the meter faster. On top of this, whenever you use a character and use one of their arts, you gain a bunch of bonus points for all sorts of random things that I don't understand. You can see that in the middle of the picture there, like bonus TP, full health TP. All those are points being added to that meter next to Noah's face on the right. And I have no reliable way to know how what move is going to give you what bonus points. So it kind of becomes a crapshoot. You just know
like,
that...
finishing a round of Classic and Smash Bros.
Yeah, pretty much. So, like, Senna is worth 15 points to use her. If you use her and do a bunch of damage, you could get, like, 28 points instead of 15, because you're just going to get a bunch of bonus shit that I have no way to explain. And chain attacks just kind of go until you run out of characters to use and fail to fill a meter, or you filled a bunch of meters, because every time you fill one of them and a super move goes off, it can keep going over and over and over again until the chain attack just kind of cuts you off and decides you've had enough. One of the gimmicks that you want to look out for, though, is like you have your two characters in an Ouroboros pair, the fusion pair, or whatever. So if you use Noah and then you use Mio, you'll get a Noah and Mio option. And if you use that, it's like a super powerful attack that goes off when you fill the meter and then ends the chain attack like completely. The problem with that is that only 3 options are given to you each time you're given a new round of a chain attack. So you can't know for sure what's going to come. So if you use Noah, then you're banking on Mio showing up. And she might, but because there are 6 other members of the party, Hero included, then there's a 1 in 7 chance that she won't. Now, all of this is on top of the fact that chain attacks in this game take for fucking ever. They changed the music specifically to this song that I'm putting on now. And it feels like it takes so damn long to finish one order, much less 3 or 4. So that chain attacks kind of become like a 10-minute affair, interrupting the middle of the flow of like the real-time battles that Xenoblade is known for, and just kind of kills the vibe. Now, they're really strong, they're fun to do, but like, they're just really interruptive to the game's kind of base style. Something else of note is that if you kill an enemy with a chain attack, the chain attack will keep going, and you can overkill them by doing more and more damage, which will give you bonuses to the drops and the experience you gain from this. Now, if you're good at doing overkills, you can end up getting really overpowered in this game by getting a ton of experience when the game wasn't expecting you to. I ended up severely overpowered in this game because I'm very good at chain attacks, which also led to me not doing much of the side content besides getting heroes, which is kind of a real meaty part of this game. And I feel like my opinion on this game is so negative because I was so overleveled by chain attacks that I didn't bother interacting with a bunch of the other cool stuff in this game and just kind of speed ran the story. Plot twist so deep in the presentation. How about that? Now, I mentioned that the chain attack gauge, the party gauge, used to be used for reviving party members. It is now no longer usable for that in this game. So this means that it is only usable for using a chain attack. So there's no reason to sit around on a chain attack when you have it charged. You might as well just let it pop. This is especially weird because on the left you can see what the chain attack gauge or the party gauge looked like in Xenoblade 1. This little bar on the top left of the screen that was nice and out of the way, so you didn't have to worry about it until you knew it was full, compared to the one in Xenoblade 3 on the right, which is this huge piece of UI bloat in the middle of the screen that means nothing besides whether or not a chain attack is charged. It might as well be like a chance button that flashes once you're ready, and nothing more. I couldn't even tell you what it takes to charge that gauge. It's so different from previous games. It's not like critical hits and stuff. There's a whole ton of ways to do it. So I just, like, I don't even bother trying to charge it. It'll charge on its own, and when it's ready, it's ready. Yeah. So if you were to break down this game's gameplay loop into kind of like a clearly readable chart, it would probably look something like this, where everything is fed into chain attack. Fusion arts improve interlinking levels, which is supposed to feed into your chain attack. The arts that you use are what you use in your chain attack. Doing combos means that the chain attack is more likely to deal damage and deal big numbers and get big points. Everything feeds into chain attacks. It is your new fucking god. I hope you like chain attacks. They are the name of the game. Just for reference, this was my chart for Xenoblade 2, where everything kind of like spreads out into different things, and the idea of the chain attack is that it's the culmination of a big loop that you're supposed to be completing repeatedly in a circle, rather than just doing the same things over and over, knowing that they're going all directly into the big gaping maw of a chain attack. I've said chain attack so many times. Couple other little things I just kind of wanted to talk about. Things that didn't really have any place elsewhere in the critique. This game's very pretty. I like the way that hair is rendered in this game. I didn't really talk much about graphics in this game. I think the game looks really good. It's probably one of the best looking games on the Switch. Although, of course, when the resolution dips because of combat, it's not going to look so good. Something noteworthy is that the game's lip syncing is actually per language, which I think kind of fucks with the game's expressions. The characters in this game are not nearly as lively as they were in Xenoblade 2, which is really supposed to fit the tone. But because I think the animators either use some sort of program to auto lip sync to the like sounds that they recorded, or they were manually done, they don't have nearly the effort or personality put into them for major like emotive moments. But I also think that's just because the game's not nearly as blatantly anime as previous games. Some of the best side content in this game compared to the rest of the series, but as I said, I was way too over-leveled for it to really matter. Tanks, blah blah blah. Money is virtually useless in this game. There's so little shops, and the shops that are there sell practically useless equipment, so there's no reason to use anything besides what you randomly scavenge from enemies, and it's going to be like thousands of equipable pieces anyway, which you have no reason to get rid of, because you shouldn't sell them, because money's pointless. So who cares? Xenoblade 1 and 2 had QTEs that occasionally popped up during combat, like if a character missed in Xenoblade 1, you'd press a button challenge out of nowhere to make sure that his morale didn't drop, which is a mechanic in the first one. Xenoblade 2 had QTEs for the specials, the super moves that you could do. In this one, it's not a thing. And that's not really like a bad thing, because who likes QTEs? But it's also not a good thing, because they were the only thing keeping you from zoning out, just mashing your arts together. So because of that, I felt myself kind of falling into the flow of combat way more often, and not really like kind of waking up to suddenly deal with a threat unless I just died. Warning level is a thing where every time you liberate a colony from Mobius, then it increases the warning level, which means that more soldiers show up in the overworld that will be like encounters you have to fight. It's such a nothing mechanic, I just didn't notice it the whole time, and I had to find out about it while I was researching this critique. Rumors are a thing, that little yellow speech bubble in the second picture. NPCs will sometimes talk about something that if you listen in, and by listening in, I mean hold down the R button and watch them slowly go through the text at their own pace, and you can't skip through it. If you listen to the whole thing, you can go to a campsite and have the party talk about their thoughts on what they heard, which could lead to new side quests. But listening to rumors is such a chore that I basically hate them. On the flip side, though, characters in the game will just like chat with each other in the overworld, even for like main story content. So while you're exploring the city for the first time, the characters in your party will go like, wow, I've never seen such a huge place that a bunch of people live. Look at these little tiny people running around. That's all neat. But on the flip side, every time you finish a fight in this game, Xenoblade is known for having very like talkative party members that'll have full conversations after you finish a fight. This time around, every party member has one single sentence that they can say, and it's always the same one. I have heard Senna say, "I'm the girl with the gall," 1,000,000 fucking times. Unique monsters, bosses that you can come across in the overworld. When you kill them, they leave behind these graves that you can use to summon them at higher levels and continue to challenge them. Those graves become fast travel locations. That's just new to this game. So if you come across a random boss in the overworld, you're obligated to kill it because it'll help you navigate the world better. That's such a great mechanic to really motivate you to kill unique monsters more than ever, and I love that. Unfortunately, fast traveling also has a time selection that you can pick from. So if you want to land somewhere fast traveling and make sure that it's night when you get there, you can. That's great, but it always defaults to morning. So if you're like me, and you're just fast traveling from point to point, not really caring where you end up, you're going to spend most of this game during the daytime. And environments in this world change as day turns to night. New enemies spawn, weather changes, the music changes. Some areas will look vastly different during the night. And that's something I barely got to experience because this one quality of life feature defaulted to morning, and I just never bothered to change it to anything else whenever I fast traveled, because it's an extra step. Those skirmishes I mentioned before, the like random encounters that you can come across in the middle of like the random world, they look like this, where you pick a side. I thought that these were going to be a story thing. Like, can you imagine a moment in the game where like you have to decide between two allies on who to side with during a major story moment? That would be so cool. And then they just never did anything with that. I'm kind of bummed about that. Also, I don't really have anything to really say about it, but like, enemies have command grabs in this game.
Oh.
You could just be fighting a Mobius, and he'll just reach down and grab Noah by the throat and throw him across the arena. Like, you lose control of the character. If he holds on to them for long enough, then they don't get to contribute to the fight, so you have to knock the guy out of their hand.
Yeah.
It's such a wild and out there mechanic that, like, I got taken so off guard by it the first time it happened. Most enemies don't do that, but, like, it's so weird when like a guy just grabs you out of nowhere. So yeah, this is most of my thoughts on Xenoblade 3. And I've been pretty negative for most of this critique. So how about we end off on something a little more positive? Allow me to tell you about my favorite scene in the game. The cock and egg.
The build up.
It's about somewhere in Chapter 5, during a part of the game I'm going to refer to as Prison Break 2005. For some context, the gang has broken into an Agnian prison camp that Monica, the leader of the Lost Numbers rebellion group in the city, has told them is currently housing a person named Gondor, who has with them the key to the place that Queen Nia, Queen of Agnes, is sleeping. The reason they need that is because Nia knows how to get into the place that Zed is hiding and kill him, so that they can finally free the world from the control of Mobius. So the gang devises a plan to sneak into the prison camp and pretend to be prisoners so they can meet with Gondor, convince them to escape the prison with them, and give them the key so that they can go and find Queen Nia. Gondor, as I mentioned, has the key, but when they arrive, they find that Gondor is actually like the 13 or so year old daughter of Monica, who has an extremely foul mouth and hates her mother for essentially allowing so many members of the city to be captured and put in prison and not giving a shit about if they live or die because, quote unquote, they knew what they signed up for. The party knew coming in here that come the next eclipse in about like a month or so, the Agnian soldiers that run the prison camp are going to execute the prisoners they have there, be they Kavesi or city folk, and project the image of their deaths into the sky so that anyone from miles around can see it. It is a way to keep the city from rebelling too hard against Mobius because they get to watch their own die at the hands of the Agnian soldiers. So the party breaks in, and they spend a few days doing labor to kind of blend in while they discuss with Gondor the circumstances of the prison break and slowly convince her of joining them. Things don't go as planned, though. They stage a prison break, 2005, and things go awry because N and M show up. Just as the prisoners are running off and chaos is hitting the prison camp, N and M arrive and begin to do battle with our party, Ouroboros. M does her crazy mind control shenanigans. This is the first time we're introduced to this concept. And first off, we see M swap places with Mio, who then turns on Noah and attacks him. And the whole fight goes crazy from there. Lance and Senna try to save the day by grabbing N and flying into the sky as Ouroboros forms, trying to blow up because when they overheat, they create an annihilation event. Hey, remember those? They try to take out N like that, but N is freed by another Mobius at the last second, and it's really unfortunate. Long story short, the party is captured, and everyone is brought back to Agnes Castle, besides Gondor. She escapes, actually. And N realizes that he knows the best way to fully, truly defeat Ouroboros deep in their hearts. He learns that Mio only has like a month of life left before she naturally expires, because that is how these soldiers operate. So he decides to stick Noah and the rest of the party in one prison cell, and stick Mio in another prison cell across a wall where she can't see the rest of them, and just wait it out. She will die the same day of that eclipse that the rest of the soldiers being executed are going to die. And he wants Noah to sit there and revel in his failure, and basically be forced to understand that he is going to have to continue his life without Mio. And by that I mean he's going to kill Noah the moment after Mio dies, but he's going to make him sit there and watch. It's fucked up. So Mio is going to get her homecoming, the thing that all these soldiers have finally, been desiring and thought of as a good thing, but in this case, they know that it's just going to be the death of Mio, and this thing that all the characters have always thought of as, like, this ultimate honor is going to be the end of Noah's relationship with Mio. In prison, from across the wall. Noah is beating on it with his bare hands. You can see his knuckles are all fucked up in that picture. Trying to get out, break out, smash through the walls. He can't fuse or anything like that. Their powers are taken away during this time. And Mio eventually convinces him to be okay with, letting her go, saying that she would have loved to spend more time with quote-unquote my Noah. But she has finally accepted that she is going to be leaving this world and leaving her legacy with Noah. Remember, by this point, they've traded those flutes I've mentioned, so Noah still has Mio's flute and she has his. But so he's technically still carrying a part of her with him. The day of the homecoming arrives. They tried to escape plenty. Our heroes have not been able to escape this prison. They are going to be executed. The eclipse arrives, and Mio is trotted out onto this huge stage in front of the Queen of Agnes and a bunch of Agnian soldiers. NM, Mobius X is also there. A traitor from the city is also there, who are all there to make sure that our heroes don't try anything funny. I'm gonna swap the music down to Noah and N. And just as Mio is being forced to her knees in front of the queens, that the homecoming can commence, N walks up, takes his Noah's flute from Mio, and puts it into to Noah's hands, and makes Noah be the Offseer to play Mio off. He is so shattered by what is going on that Noah can't even grip the flute right, and he just drops it to the ground. So the other Offseers from Agnes in the area are forced to see to see Mio off, who turns to look Noah in the eyes and smile and say thanks for everything, it was fun, before she fades away and leaves behind just a pile of her clothes and her flute. Mio dies. After this, Noah is so distraught he is unaware of his surroundings, as he is shoved to his knees, and N takes out his sword and decapitates Noah. Noah is executed. The game gives you a prompt to save your game, and a chapter concludes and commences after that. And Noah goes on a weird little vision quest in his head for a bit. He sees this little kid who talks cryptically to Noah about how much he cared for Mio, and how this is an awful thing to happen to anybody. It sucks to lose people you care for, but this is just the way of life, Sure, she was cut short, but it was going to happen eventually, right? And eventually this kid, this weird little boy, posits to Noah, hey, if you had the power, your own strength, not that of anyone else, to, change the world here, rip it up by its foundations and make a better life for anyone in the world here, would you be able to do it if you had the strength? And Noah insists, yes, I understand that, these are the lives we lead, but, Mio was taken unfairly. This is all put on us by the people in charge, the people in power. If he had a second chance to change the world, not for his sake, but for everyone's, would he take it? And he says yes. The weird little boy reveals herself to be Mio in this moment. It's weird. And Noah and her relive a bunch of their past lives together, where they witness N and M's past, a bunch of other lives where they've met and fallen in love and run away, some of which even when Noah and Mio have abandoned their friends just to spend their last moments together. Every single time they have come into being, they've met and fallen in love. And finally, when Noah is at his highest, he accepts that if I had the power to change fate, I would. And suddenly, Noah is brought back to life, or at least brought back into the moment, where it reveals that M had swapped bodies with him at that moment, so N stopped his blade before he killed Noah. N turns to M, asks what the meaning of all this is, why is she stepping in to stop him from killing Noah, this is what they're here for. And M brushes off and steps up to Noah and offers him Mio's flute. And she says to him, hey, so I look a little different now, but like, is that okay with you? Like, are you okay with me being a little different than normal? And N looks at M, who picks Noah up with his hand. They're holding hands and staring at each other and smiling. And it slowly dawns on him that, oh yeah, M could swap bodies, right? She swapped bodies with Mio back when they escaped prison and never swapped back. And she would rather have died than spend any longer with N. And in doing so, allowed Mio to take her immortal body, M's body, and live with Noah past her expiration date. And realizes this and starts screaming his head off that his love of his life has been taken from him, and that her only remnant in this world, her living body, has now chosen Noah instead of him. The cuckening.
The cuckening!
God.
They proceed to fuse together and beat the ever-loving shit out of N, and save everyone that involved in this execution. And it's the first time that they truly get to get a leg up against Mobius and N, and it's the final step of progression of their character arcs towards the end of the game. I genuinely had no idea how this game was going to progress at this point. I saw that Mio died, and I was like, she's a major gameplay mechanic, they can't just get rid of her. But like, I have no fucking clue where this game is going right now. I did not expect a man to get cucked to death.
Holy shit.
So yeah, of the good and the bad. Character writing's great, tutorials are great, I didn't even talk about those, but they're actually accurate and good compared to Xenoblade 2, and you actually can retry them in a training mode in an RPG. The character designs are better and more cohesive, the arts in combat feels more interesting from like a micro standpoint than Xenoblade 2 did. But overall macro, I wouldn't say the same. The game is a little too tightly thematically wrapped for my tastes, but like, what you gonna do? Of the bad, you know, the combats are kind of a mess because there's so many characters. The classes are cool, but they homogenize the cast. The environments are a little samey. Chain attacks become your god, and they're make every other gameplay mechanic kind of feel like a footnote, and they take so damn long. The villains are not great. The story feels short. But the moments in it are great instead. The world is empty, and that's theming-wise good, but gameplay-wise bad. The cast of the game feels neutered by the hero system, several mechanics stop mattering, and money is kinda useless. But like, overall, I still like this game. I gotta say though, it did leave me with a lot of kind of unanswered questions. Like, they say that Zed rose to power because he's the embodiment of the fears that the people felt when they learned that their worlds were being merged together. Like, that flashback scene with Noah in the start of the game, and we see a little bit after the end, like, everyone looked kind of chill. And that was the moment the worlds merged. You'd think people would be panicking if that was true, right? And also there's the question of, like, what happened to all the characters we knew from the previous games and whatever. And something I was most curious about, of note of the game, is that everyone always states this as an extremely good conclusion to the game's trilogy. Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade 2, and Xenoblade 3 being the finale of a plotline that they were building up, when the world, the characters, the plot of Xenoblade 3 has extremely little to do with previous games. Less so than 1 and 2 did with each other. And I thought for a while, like, why is this listed as a conclusion for most people? Why do most people think that this is the end of a trilogy, when it really doesn't feel like much of a connection? The reason is because in a piece of promotional release info or whatever, back when the game came out, Tetsuya Takahashi said that this game represents a stopping point for him, that it depicts the conclusion of the Xenoblade story that began with Klaus's experiment, which is the inciting event that split the two worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 apart, and a very, like, big twist that's only really talked about at the ends of Xenoblade 1 and 2. But, like, this game's got nothing to do with Klaus. We know a lot about Klaus by this point. He was the architect in Xenoblade 2, he was an evil god in Xenoblade 1. Like, he's not even mentioned at all in this game. Right? So, like, what's up with that? Why is this being labeled as an experiment? Why is this being labeled as a conclusion? Wouldn't it be nice to have, like, a game that actually had to do with these two previous games? That, like, actually felt like it was going to wrap these games up in a nice little bow? Welcome to Future Redeemed.
Oh.
The DLC expansion story for Xenoblade 3. I did not talk about Torna the Golden Country, the DLC for Xenoblade 2, but in this case, it is impossible to separate these two titles from each other. Simply because of what is put down on the plate when you play Future Redeemed. Future Connected, the epilogue that was added to the re-release of Xenoblade 1 back when it came out for the Switch, was labeled advertising-wise as an example of what's coming next in the story of or at least in the series. I didn't really understand that. It had some connections to Xenoblade 3 in retrospect. In this case, they advertised Future Redeemed the same way, a hint of what was next for the series. Oh boy. Oh boy. Future Redeemed is a very different beast than its base game predecessor. And it is probably some of my favorite content this series has ever gotten. The story is wild. It's just got a bunch of like crazy shit going on in it. It's small still for a DLC story. It involves past content that never really got to matter much, like Black Fog, as part of its main like premise and plot. The final act of the game is so insane compared to any other previous game in the series. I still hold that Torna, Xenoblade 2 DLC, has the best final boss in the series, but the final act of this game fucking blew my nuts off, and I'll tell you why in a second. It's still short, but it's a DLC, so I'll forgive it, right? The entire main cast and the main villain are all really great, and I like them a lot. Matthew, the guy with the ponytail in the top image there, he's a fucking dunce. All he wants to do is, like, if there's anyone standing in his way, he's gonna beat the shit out of them. And he's a goober about it the entire time. He's a moron, he's basically Goku. His partner, meanwhile, A, is just this really cool, kind of aloof and mysterious character that, if you're new to the series by playing Xenoblade 3, you won't be able to tell, but if you've played previous games, you understand who they are. They are Alvis, a character from Xenoblade 1, who is essentially that world's version of Pyra and Mithra, who disappeared at the end of Xenoblade 1, and has now kind of come back as a guardian for this world, since this campaign takes place about an indiscernible amount of time before the base game. It's like, could be thousands of years, we don't know. They're just this like really weird, aloof, and kind of like suave samurai person with like a crazy thin, cool sword that can help them see the future, like the Minato in Xenoblade 1. Niall, Matthew's sister, who's the kind of like character you're chasing after the whole game, acts as the antagonist, although she's kind of possessed by another entity called Alpha, who I still think is cool. Niall's whole thing is that after the original city fell to Mobius, we actually see the first act that N ever had as a Mobius, which was to slaughter the people of the city at the time. It's how, in Zed's eyes, he earned him his like wife back. And fucking ravages the original city and sends a bunch of the city folk like floating to the wind, essentially. Matthew loses contact with Niall, who ends up in contact with the main villain and starts doing his dirty work, collecting up city folk so that they can be shepherded off to a new world, and the original one can be destroyed, killing everyone inside of it. Alpha, as a character, is basically Z. He's the emotionless, like, monster who just wants to progress his goals and nothing further. But you're told explicitly from the start that he's basically an unfeeling, unthinking machine, and that A is basically his conscience. So they have all the excuses ready to know that he's not supposed to be like a full emotional, feeling, thinking character. But if A was a part of him, he would. And best of all, N is still in this campaign, and he fights the final boss with you. He's not a hero. By that point, you already have a hero in your party. So the final boss is fought with 8 party members.
What are the
Yeah?
what are the logistics of how N is in the past?
He's immortal. So this was when he first became a Mobius.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I don't think M is a thing by this point. N was made into a Mobius and went to slaughter the city to earn M back into existence in Zed's eye, essentially. So his whole attack on the city spurred Matthew's whole plot in this case. But we don't see M at all during this plot because she's probably not around yet. The world that the like side campaign takes place in is really diverse and a lot of fun to explore, and it has all the really crazy bombastic music that you expect out of the other like games in the series, in compared to Xenoblade 3's like kind of laid back, emotional and dark tunes. Certain areas you need to gather resources to even open in the first place, so it's I'm not gonna say Metroidvania-ish, but like how you navigate the world is open to expression, and I like that a lot. Ouroboros is out the window. No more of that mechanic. Instead, you just have like a special version of fusion arts, and I am happier for it. Ouroboros was like such an afterthought at some point that like I just did not care for it as a mechanic, so getting rid of it is totally cool with me. None of the characters have classes they can swap around. They just have unique playstyles. Fucking points in my book, and I should not have to explain to you why. There's still tons of customization in the builds that you make. Characters have unity combos, which are essentially team-up attacks, and you can team up anyone with anyone else, and every combination has different effects, and you can slap on these equipment called manuals that even further change what those do. And best of all, the way you upgrade your characters in this DLC is so fucking good. The way you do it? Literally doing anything. If you explore areas, if you kill enough of a specific enemy in a specific area, if you like do quests, if you collect items from the overworld, like any and all of those things gain you experience points that you can then spend on like perks of your choice on these characters. Literally, like, how you want to build your characters and what you want to do to get those points is entirely up to you. It is the best way I've seen any of these games give you the chance to build your characters and gain new stuff. It basically just encourages you to interact with everything the game has to offer. Because if you run out of like all the enemies in the overworld to kill and you still want to get more points, then go and collect some stuff, which you've probably already been doing anyway. Like, it's great. This needs to be brought back in another game. Like, the affinity growth system from this should be the standard moving forward. I'm going to give you, by the way, a quick run-through of this game's plot because I just want to. Fuck you. It's all in one slide, so don't worry. Here's what goes on in Future Redeemed. Game starts with N slaughtering the city folk, scattering them to the wind. Matthew and A end up meeting up during this time, looking around for Niall, hoping that Matthew's sister is still alive. They're looking for Niall when they come across a battle between Agnian and Kevesi forces. Something I like about this already is that the plot has nothing to do with the war itself. They come across a battle with only 2 survivors, one on either side, Nicole and Glimmer, who in that picture are the ones on the left, the blonde kid and the girl with the ponytail. And they basically recruit these 2 kids to looking for Niall with them because they have nowhere else to go. Their friends are all dead, and Matthew killed the 2 consuls that were running their colonies, so he accidentally gave them Ouroboros powers by basically exposure. So now all their friends hate them. Glimmer tries to run off and get back with her friends anyway, and ends up almost killed for it. The rest of the party has to go and rescue her, to which they end up getting saved as well by old versions of Shulk and Rex from Xenoblade 1 and 2. They become your last party members, and you can just have old, grizzled versions of Shulk and Rex in your party, and that's fucking rad. You eventually discover that Niall is kind of possessed by this AI that controls the world, and that she has been gathering city folk so that this AI can shepherd them off to another world and kill everyone left behind. It's essentially a very extreme version of out with the old, in with the new, because the city folk are the new people in this world. Yeah, I just said that. So you, the new gang, and N, because he has reasons not to allow Alpha to control the world, he wants Mobius to do it instead, all join forces and you kill Alpha and pave way for the main story to happen, because it allows the actual city that you meet in the base game to be built. All the people you play as in this game are the founders of that city. It allows N to show his kind of like malice and evil and earn M back, who is then the big kind of twist to the game and all that shit. Like, it stands on its own, but it allows it to better flow into the base game story. And because of all the links to the past games, A and Alpha being aspects of Alvis from Xenoblade 1, their relation to the characters of the Aegises of Xenoblade 2, Rex and Shulk being there, and basically being the torchbearers that pass it off to the new kids on the block. Nickel and Glimmer, the kids that you recruited earlier, turn out to be their children from their own worlds. Nickel is Shulk's son, Glimmer is Rex's daughter. It's never made apparent to them, because they don't understand that, but like, they're passing the torch to their kids and whoever else is able to bear it to change the world and save the day and make a better future for people. Like, it's cool and acts as that conclusion that I've seen people saying Xenoblade 3 is when the DLC is it. I like this a lot. There's one last detail I want to bring up, though. You guys ever listen to radio? So, during the end of the game, I'm just going to pause the music at this point. When Matthew ends up chasing Niall all the way to the center of Alpha's power, they all end up in the world that Alpha has promised the city folk will get by basically being spirited away under his power. It is a recreation of Earth before any of the game's plotlines take place, because as a reminder, Xenoblade is a post-apocalyptic series. The planet that Xenoblade 2 used to take place on was originally Earth, and the world of Xenoblade 1 was a essentially pocket dimension that split off of it. So they both stem back from Earth. We are supposed to take anything that happens in this this kind of fake world as a recreation of the exact details that the original Earth had, because that is what Alpha says it is. He used his recollection and data of the existence of original Earth to recreate a new one for the denizens of the city. That is all to say that while Niall and Matthew have their argument over their ideologies, they do so in the backyard of a suburb, where
On Grove Street.
Yeah, on Grove Street. Where on a table nearby there is a radio playing a little news broadcast. And the game clearly wants you to know what this radio is broadcasting, because if you have subtitles on, Niall and Matthew's argument has subtitles on the bottom of the screen like usual, but the radio has subtitles on the top of the screen, just in case you're missing any of what it's saying in the distance. Allow me to tell you what it says. There are two things that it says that are really the gist of the whole conversation. First of all, Earth was a spacefaring society that had colonized the Milky Way by the time that Earth was destroyed and led to Xenoblade 1 and 2. they talk about something called the Earth-Life Colonization Project, or Project Exodus, where a bunch of people have gotten on these huge, kind of like, what's the term, motherships, let's go with, and went out and colonized the stars, and they project that by the end of the year, about 10 million humans will be off in space. Second, a group of quote-unquote people called saviorites exist and are vying for human rights, which they apparently do not have and are being denied, and their current push for the government to grant them human rights is being probably canned later that week. So, like, what the fuck does that mean? Who the hell are the saviorites? We heard about them once in Xenoblade 2, that they became rebels that basically attacked the main governments of the world and kind of coaxed Klaus, that scientist I mentioned before, into doing his experiment and destroying life as we knew it. So, like, why are they being brought up again? And clearly that this is, like, implying the conditions that led them to becoming violent and causing Klaus to do his experiment. What does any of this mean? I'll tell you what this means. It means Xenoblade Chronicles X is canon now.
Yes!
Xenoblade Chronicles X is a game about Earth being destroyed, like fully blown up, because two alien species get into a firefight over Earth, and the humans learned about this early. They got intel. So they created the Earth-Life Colonization Project to escape Earth before it was destroyed. Now, the specifics of the circumstances are different in Xenoblade X versus in this radio broadcast. It doesn't seem like that's like actually going to be because the Earth is blowing up. Rather, the Project Exodus in Xenoblade X specifically began when the firefight began. It was an escape plan. This time around, it's just people leaving Earth because they're advanced enough. However, the Saviorites thing is not from Xenoblade X. It's from Xenosaga, which is the predecessor series to Xenoblade, which is owned by Bandai Namco. Saviorite, well, first of all, the radio bears the logo of Vector Industries, the company that Shion, the main character of Xenosaga, works for. Like, that is undeniable. That is a Vector Industries logo. So Vector Industries exists. Among the Saviorites plotline is mentioned a politician named Dmitry Yuriev, who stands in opposition of the Saviorites becoming, or being given human rights. Dmitry Yuriev is a character from Xenosaga. And he is essentially an immortal, Ra's al Ghul-ish figure, who has been playing people in politics to his advantage for thousands of years. There's some complications, though. Also, they mentioned the Philadelphia-class mothership, which is a phrase from Xenogears, which is the series that predates Xenosaga, which is owned by Square Enix. But I'm not going to go so far as to say that that's an overt, thing taken from Xenogears. Anyway, there's some complications, some incongruous details to all this shit. Dimitri is misspelled. It is usually spelled without the I between the D and the M in Xenosaga, and this time around they have an I there for some reason. And the Saviorites, he's also said to be part of some group called the Minos Authority, which I have no idea what the fuck that is. That's not from anything. The Earth-like colonization project's circumstances are different, like I said. And the Saviorites that are vying for the human rights, in the Japanese version, or the Japanese dub, are called Salvators, which is explicitly a race of, genetically engineered children from Xenosaga, who do not have equal human rights. It's just bizarre that they're not called that in the English dub, because everything else is trying really heavily to line up with other things from other canons, and yet the Saviorites are not being called Salvators. Remember back at the beginning of this presentation when I said Monolith Soft now has experience with localization? This is why I brought that up. Because if they wanted this to be 100% the Xenosaga canon is now canon to this world, then they would have made sure that that name is the same across both versions of the dub. But because it's not, I've seen a lot of people online saying that this means Xenosaga is a huge deal now and we need to pay attention to it. I don't quite agree. This radio fucking exploded the fan base for this game the moment people learned about it, and it has not been the same. I've said before that this DLC was kind of supposed to be like the implication of what's coming next for the franchise. The fact that they're implying that Xenosaga is canon now is insanity. If that's what's coming, making the games tie together, I don't even know what the hell to think. Now, there's also another thing about this DLC story, and I'm going to keep playing music now, that I kind of want to cover before we close things out. This is a handful of things, really. There is an after-credits scene for this DLC that is a little odd to me. This is what it looks like. We see Jupiter in space and everything, and the camera pans past Jupiter to kind of show what we assume is the space that Earth is supposed to be in. And at first we see kind of like two silhouettes appear in the space before two Earths appear on top of each other, slowly drifting apart from each other. Implied to be the two worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2, separating now that the plotline is finished and Noah has saved the day, and the two worlds will never meet again. However, as they separate, they begin to glow, even brighter and brighter as they get further apart, until when the light becomes so big, so bright that it is too much for the camera to bear, it flashes, and all that is left is one planet. Now, there's a lot to be implied from this, but I think the obvious is that the two worlds simply became one. They safely merged, and that the settings of Xenoblade 1 and 2 are now just plainly, averagely together, with no, danger implied by the two of them intersecting like the world of Ionios was. It was the fact that they could not handle being together, and it created this awful nightmare world. But now that things have been set to right, I guess, the worlds can handle it, and the characters of both worlds might be able to actually interact one day. And the last shot of that we see is simply the surface of the planet, kind of taking up most of the screen. And then once the credits music finally ends, a little blue light slowly comes in from space, landing closer to the planet. And we get no further detail as to what that means. It could be anything. And to this day, we have no idea what the future holds for this campaign. This game, this series. So, does it work as a conclusion, this game? This DLC? Takahashi has actually since rescinded his statement. He says it's more like a passing point and not a culmination. The base game kind of doesn't have too much to do with the other games in the series, and it retcons itself out of existence, so what's the point? And the DLC has a bigger tie to it, but it kind of feels like a band-aid on a big gash. And there's no real mention of any of the major plot points that people had questions about that were linking the two worlds, namely the Zohar, which is the big conduit thing that Pyra got her power from, which may be from Xenosaga, no confirmation, but highly likely. And there's the fact that it's trying to weld canon with other games. They're trying to put Xenosaga and Xenoblade X somewhere in this world, but it just feels like it's interfering with what we had already because there's just so many incongruous details. To me, personally, Xenosaga is so deeply steeped in Bible stuff that I really hope that it doesn't become properly canon, because then I'm going to have to concern myself with the fact that Jesus and Mary Magdalene are characters in this franchise. Fun fact for you, Cosmos, main character of Xenosaga, is a robot made out of the body of Mary Magdalene. She is fucking Jesus' mom or whatever.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
That is so fucking dumb. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it too.
Kinda wish I didn't know that, honestly.
The Saviorites are a detail I'd love to know more about. And people say that they're supposed to be the Salvatores, but the fact that the localization didn't change them intentionally stakes out to me. So I don't believe that theory for a second. Japanese name the same, localization disagrees. And the other games, they just can't be canon. Like, Earth is known as Lost Jerusalem in Xenosaga, and the whole point of the series is that they're trying to find it again. Don't ask me why it got lost. The answer is stupid. It's because they shrank it.
So dumb.
It's the fucking dumbest possible answer.
Yep. And
Wait,
there's no ghost ganglion dogfight over Earth, so like the Earth-like colonization project couldn't be the same thing from Xenoblade X. Sorry, you had a question?
There's no Xenogears spoilers in the rest of this presentation, are there?
No, Xenogears
Okay.
is so deeply like Square Enix that they could not get the rights to it if they tried.
I'm still planning to play that.
Matthew and Noah are clearly supposed to be like references to Faye from Xenogears, but that's as far as they get. And there's still a bunch of weird questions left on the table even now. Like, the city folk, they just died when Ionios got destroyed. Like, they were new life that did not stem from either of the other two settings, Xenoblade 1 or 2. So, like, what happened to them? We assume that all the soldiers in the war were people from the two worlds that were just repurposed into child soldiers, so they'll be back. But, like, what about Gondor and Monica? Are they gonna just, like, disappear forever? Who are the Saviorites? I don't fucking know. I'd love to know more about that. The drama of a race that doesn't have human rights tickles my like, funny bone for story the way that Blades did, the same way. Did the worlds merge? Were there hiccups? I don't know. My theory that they did is just a theory. So, like, I'd love to see more about a world where the Xenoblade 1 and 2 stories intersect in awkward ways. I'd love for an actual war to break out between the two of them, rather than just, like, a bunch of idiots making children fight because they thought it was funny. What was that light that was landing on the planet? Was it Cosmos? Was it Elma from Xenoblade X? Some other unknown third thing? Is it the protagonist of Xenoblade 4? I don't know.
Like,
Like-
Master Chief.
Yeah, it's Master Chief. Does any of the radio broadcasts even mean anything, or is it just empty fan service like the rest of this fucking game's ruins are? And who the hell is Riku? What are you? Well, boy, do I have a place for answers! It's the fucking... Well, we'll get there. What is actually next for this series? Here's some of my hopes, gameplay-wise. Less party members, lower the importance of chain attacks, stop making healers the only guys able to revive people, bring back the Future Redeemed Affinity Growth system, and let party members play uniquely. Please, that was like my favorite thing. As for scenario, I want a space adventure. You mentioned that Earth colonized the galaxy out there. That means that when fucking Klaus did his experiment and destroyed Earth and all the people living on it, there were people out there in the galaxy that were probably safe. What if suddenly Earth has reformed into a Xenoblade 1+2 world, and suddenly the humans that colonized the planets out in space gain connection back to Earth again, and see that it's a completely different place than they remember after it's been gone for who knows how long? That would be really cool. It's also something kind of adjacent to the plot of Xenosaga, so you can have your cake and eat it too, where you make a new Xenosaga game without it being Xenosaga, and you don't need to pay Bandai Namco for the license every time you say Cosmos' name. Give us some more intel on the Saviorites. I think they're really cool as a concept from what I've heard so far, and I'd love to know more. And please, no Bible shit. Like, I told you why I hate that. I don't care. And honestly, I would love to see the world of Kevas and Agnes merge together into one setting, but I'm not in a rush. Like, it would be cool to see Shulk and Rex actually meet up and have dinners every once in a while, but like, I don't know, man. I'd love to have new stories. I don't mind. Other possibilities, though. We could get a Xenoblade X port, maybe for the Switch 2. Maybe a sequel. We could get that M-rated game they mentioned. Maybe they're gonna remake Xenosaga instead of, like, doing new sequels to Xenoblade with it involved. Hell, the art that you see on the side of the screen are all from an in-house art contest. they're not related to any specific title, but clearly the brains at Monolith Soft are working hard on some crazy things. There are other pictures here that I didn't include because I didn't want to bombard you guys with too many. But the ones here, conceptually, look really rad.
They're working on the next Animal Crossing.
Probably.
Clearly.
They helped with the last ones. But speaking of in-house art, the answer to those questions I was having just a second ago. The art book has lore. There was an interview in the Ionios Moments art book for Xenoblade 3 with Tetsuya Takahashi and his team, where he goes further into detail about some missing details that were either not present in Xenoblade 3 or things that people wanted clarification on. Some of those details include Ionios is basically a virtual world, so anyone that controls like Origin, basically the main device that created Ionios, controls the natural laws of the world. So when Z had control of it, he made it so that Mobius was in power and all the children would fight for him and shit like that. When Alpha was in power, he made it so that Mobius could not stop him and he could collect up the city folk as he wished. The villains, Mobius, were made explicitly to be, quote, closer to reality. Tetsuya Takahashi goes on to explain this means he meant that they were unsympathetic and not very deep. Don't worry, we could tell.
Mm-hmm.
He also says that Noah is the Ubermensch that rejects nihilism. This is his exact words. I just want you to sit on that for a second. He reveals that Nappan are immortal in Ionios. So Riku just fucking lived forever, and that's why he's been around, because Nappan just don't die. That city folk will be reborn into the new worlds. So I like to picture that there's now a queue for souls for babies, where all the city folk are just gonna be born. Like if I was just a person in fucking Bionis, and I had a baby with my wife, and out popped Gondor, like, okay, cool, I guess I'm Gondor's dad now. Riku is related to Ricky, party member from Xenoblade 1. Could be his son or grandson, who knows. But finally, some answers as to why Riku is all over the place, because he's related to one of the party members of Xenoblade 1. That's nice. I hope nothing else really weird is answered in any of these interview questions. Lucky 7, Noah's sword, is Fiora from Xenoblade 1, Shulk's girlfriend.
Did he elaborate on that at all?
When he said this, the rest of the staff looked at him in confusion. No one knew of this information until he said it, and he just said that, yeah, all the metal that made Origin and all the crazy like machinery that helps run the world of Ionios is basically like infused with the people of the other settings. So like a gear that you find could be Ryan or Dunban or like Zeke or fucking Tora, who knows. That's literally what he says. Like any of them you find, they could be a friend of yours that you knew in a past life. This is apparently something that only he knew at the time, and it's fucking hilarious that specifically Lucky 7 is Fiora, and it is the name is in reference to the fact that most fans call her 7 to avoid spoiling that she's also the 7th party member of the game. Matthew's gauntlets, he's got fists in Future Redeemed, are Pyra and Mithra, respectively. This is actually something we kind of got to see in the DLC story, because during the last fight, they kind of crack open and you see Pyra's core in one of his fists. But just the confirmation is absurd. And lastly, En's sword is Malos from Xenoblade 2, the main villain. But like, Malos is dead though. But he's dead though. Oh god, is he not dead? Pyra and Mithra heard his voice after he died. Oh shit! Why is Takahashi saying we'll learn more about this in the future? Malos, what the fuck? Thanks for watching.
Fans are drinking good.
Yeah.
I'm glad the presentation ended on this song, because this one's fucking crazy.
Oh, I have one more meme for you guys. Malos. So yeah, that's Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed. Thank you for attending.
Jeez.
I don't know what the hell this series' future has in store, and that excites me. I just hope to God that it's not learning that Jesus is canon to Shulk and Rex's story.